All good? Yep. Hey, sorry, can I just get everyone's attention? It is 1 o'clock and we have just pushed the button on the live stream. So we are live streaming. Okay, and I think we're all pretty much accounted for, right, for councillors? Yeah. Okay, so so look, a little bit of a different start to the meeting this afternoon because of course our chair Andrew is an apology for this morning. So we do just need to appoint a chair, and my understanding is that our acting mayor is going to bring a motion in regard to the appointment of a chair for the meeting today.
Well, I'd be delighted to suggest that Claire St. Pierre takes the chair for the finance meeting today.
Okay, so Liz proposing, Lou seconding. Are there any other nominations? Nope. Okay, so we'll just put that to the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Claire.
Okay. Okay, thanks everyone. So we've got quite a big agenda today, this afternoon, and the first item is apologies. So Claire, I think you'll have some apologies already from this morning.
Yeah, but the apologies of Mayor Milcross, Councillor Andrew Brown and Councillor Marcus Gower for non-attendance be received.
Okay. Thank you, Roger, and Alwyn will second. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. And now disclosure of members' interests. Any? Oh, yes, Philip. Item 10. Oh, no, I don't know. And yeah, Fonterra Brands. All right, as well. Okay, all right. So we'll just make a note of that when we get to that item. Cool. Okay, thank you. And any late items? Cool. Okay, great. So we move to the confirmation of the order of the meeting. Thank you, Graham and Lou second. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And so now confirmation of the minutes of our last meeting. So these start on page 8 of our agenda. So I'll just go through them page by page. Page 8, page 9, 10, 11 and 12. Anything anyone wants to bring up? No. You move, Roger will move that they're a true and correct record and a seconder. Philip, thank you. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Excellent. Right, so our first item of general business is the removal of cheques from banks. And we have Sarah Davies who's going to speak to that for us. Welcome, Sarah.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and councillors. As you can see in this report, we're obviously suggesting a timeline on when we get rid of cheques as payment methods for our ratepayers and other customers, and then also our use of cheques internally through accounts payable and petty cash and stuff like that. So in my report does detail the timeline of the different banks that are continuing to go away from cheques and not issue and accept them. Our main bank, ASB, won't be accepting cheques from August 2021, but New Zealand's biggest bank, ANZ, is actually getting rid of cheques on 31st of May. So our suggestion in the report is to stop using cheques here at 30th of April 2021, which allows us time to communicate this to our ratepayers and other customers, including our digital adult literacy program, which the libraries is running for us. So there is a little graph there showing the number of payments received by counter receipting that are cheque payments, and just a note on that. So you can see it's declining, and it has been for the last several years. But a note on that, we said 3,957 payments. So there's likely to be a far fewer number of ratepayers and other customers using them, because there will be multiple payments from the same ratepayers. So it's just a quick note there. So I think I'll just leave it open for questions, because I know there might be a few.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Hazel, yes.
So I'd really like to ask you, why can't you leave the, sorry, I didn't realise you couldn't hear me. Leave it until the 27th of August when the official closing date comes, because you go hoisting this on them now, and I would like to know the age bracket of those particular 4,000 or 300 and 3,900 and whatever, because, you know, you're going to do it, and that's going to create a lot of hardship. When are the rates all due? And, you know, it's kind of like, it's adding salt to the wounds at the moment, and we're going to have to work out some way of helping our people, particularly our elderly who live alone and whose families don't live locally. And we've been trying to do that through phone banking and teaching phone banking, but it's taking a heck of a long time. And now to suddenly spring this on the community, to me, is not acceptable. I don't see why you can't go up to August the 27th and let us try and do something. And are you still taking cash, aren't you?
Yes, yes. We will be continuing to take cash. Sorry, and just in response to that, so the reason, and it is listed in the report, that we chose 30th of April as a suggestion was because we have to properly communicate this to ratepayers. Not only that, because New Zealand's biggest bank is, leaving on the 31st of May, it's going to be hard for customer service to distinguish what cheques they can and can't take, and then properly communicate that to ratepayers of different banks along the way. So we thought it was best, and it made most sense to do it prior to that date, so we can do a really good communications strategy and communicate to our entire ratepayer and customer base, not just specific sections as we go along the timeline.
It might make sense to you, but it certainly doesn't. Sorry.
I know. And then I had Roger with a question, and then Lou. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have to echo your concern as Treasurer for Cambridge Grey Power. I know the challenges that presents in terms of a huge part of our constituency not having the development in methods of payment that are the alternative to cheques. I realise that it's going to have to come, but I would have preferred to have seen an educational programme undertaken well in advance of the final date for acceptance of cheques, if it's at all possible.
Yeah. I mean, no. That's. I'm sorry. I've had my say, and I just see what everybody else has got to say.
And I wonder if we could have Lou's comments now as well.
Yeah, thank you very, Madam Chair. Actually, as a financial controller working with the RSA, we have over 1,700 members, many of them elderly. But the thing is, of course, logistically, the banks have been putting charges on the operation of cheques for quite some time now. So there is a cost to this, quite a significant cost, particularly when you've got vast volumes of them. So we've been trying to educate our members for quite some time now to get into another methods of payment. And I know that there's that scheme at the library, and that's worked very well. And I think that we could promote that through Grey Power as well.
Oh, we've tried.
And these people, I know what Councillor Barnes is talking about, the people that are probably isolated, but there are members of the community that go and visit these people, and they should have that technology to help them to get out and utilise it. But look, this is not us implementing it. It is coming from the banks. It's been well advertised now, probably 12 months.
Yes, it's not a surprise, isn't it? Yes, Ken.
Yeah, so look through the chair. So I guess there's a certain amount of delaying the inevitable here. So even if we did push out beyond the 30th of April, quite clearly the banks are totally exiting cheques. So really it is just delaying the inevitable. Our next rates instalment is due in May. Okay, so it's due on the 21st of May. There is obviously that 1 week or so grace period. So look, if we left this open beyond the end of April, obviously we'd be getting into that May rates period. And if somebody is towards the end of that, well, from the 31st of May, just a day or two really after penalty date, ANZ are not going to honour those cheques, and ANZ are the biggest bank on the market here. So we do have that consideration. In regard to education, what we were looking to do is with that rates instalment, which will go out at the end of April, be really clear in our communications with the ratepayers that we just can't we can't accept the cheques anymore. Obviously, we'll talk about the alternative methods in regard to communication as well over the next month. Of course, we are fronting up to both grey powers. Those sessions are booked in both in Cambridge and Te Awamutu. We're presenting on the long-term plan. I would be very happy to actually as part of that those two meetings to talk to this or have one of the staff members talk to this, so that we are clearly conveying with that ratepayer group we can't accept cheques anymore. Yes, I know we'll probably have things hurled at us, but look, we're happy to be up front here, and really there's nothing in the longer term that council can do here. The banks are not accepting cheques as a mechanism going forward. So at some point very, very, very soon, whatever date is set today, at some point very, very soon, they just no longer are an option. That's beyond council's control. So I guess the team has put this proposition in front of you, just saying, look, we'd like to make a really clear cut-off date. That date is a little bit in advance of the of the mechanism ending by the banks. We appreciate that. We've done it a bit in advance, but we've done that deliberately so that we've done it in advance of all of the banks. So we don't have this funny situation that some people can still pay by cheques and some can't. We just prefer a much cleaner cut-off. So that's where we've landed, where we have.
It just really is adding to the marginalisation of our elderly people in the community today, that so much has been taken away from them and they haven't had time. There is not time between now and the 31st of this month to get round, it looks like, the 4,000. Of that there'll be a high percentage. I know from our grey power group in Te Awamutu, I think we've got 98 homes that we will have to 98 of our people have to sort out and to help. But the trouble is with this is that what you technology people don't actually realise is the increased mental stuff that goes with this. The depression rates there actually fall because someone goes into their home, and we've seen all this happen, to show them how to use their telephones. And I'm boring, I know, but and then by the time they get out to the gate, the poor soul thinks, now what did they say? What did we have to do? That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about all of those that can do. We're talking about those that can't. However, we know that this is going to happen. All I'm going to make my statement here is that I'd never thought I'd belong to an organisation that marginalised our senior citizens who have kept this country going like this, and to add to their burdens. But we will do our very best to get around and set up the phone banking for them, because they haven't got computers. They haven't even got these stupid things that only work half the time or whatever. And so, you know, that's the fact. And it's about a fact that's about time the community actually observed. Luckily, all of these people are a grandmother or a grandfather. and they've got caring people that can come from whatever distance. But I'm truly, the banks have got a lot to answer for doing this. All they think about is money. They don't care about anything else. And so the movement of grey power, age concern, and a lot of them, if you cared to read about it, you would read about how more and more and more our senior citizens are being marginalised, and the mental effect that actually then has. So I've said my piece, and you're not going to change your mind, and the banks are all going to do it. They don't care. So that's how it feels. And yet I do phone banking.
To test the feeling of the council members around the table, may I move an amendment that, given the date of the next rates payment and the notification to the state, our community, that will be possibly the last time that they could pay by check? Could we move or make an amendment to Part B, that the 30th of April 2021 be replaced by the 31st of May 2021? And that means that the next rates payment would still be able to be made by checks. A good indication for them would result.
Could I just have Ken comment on that proposal?
So Councillor, I understand where you're coming from. I would be very nervous about that, because my understanding is that the ANZ Bank, the largest retail bank in the country, is not actually honouring cheques beyond the 31st of May. So I am a little bit worried about that, because we could have a customer come in on the 31st of May. We've obviously got to get that cheque to the bank. And
the executive summary says our main bank, ASB, will not be accepting cheques from August 2021.
So hang on a sec. So through the chair, I think that's a reference to the ASB Bank honouring their own cheques, their own ASB customer cheques. The difficulty here is some of our councillors will, some of our ratepayers and customers will be using ANZ cheques that I believe the ANZ will not honour beyond the 31st of May. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah. So there was actually a part of our thinking here is let's make the cut-off 30th of April, so we have no situation where we've received a cheque and can't honour it, because can't get it honoured, because then that's going to involve us having to chase that customer and say, actually, that cheque you gave us, the bank will not honour, we need you to pay again. And Hazel, there is no attempt here to marginalise people, but I certainly wouldn't want to be in that situation where I'm rocking up to an elderly person and saying the bank's not honouring your cheque, you need to find another means of payment, post the event. So that's why we were looking for this really clean cut-off, well and truly before any of the banks stop honouring their cheques.
You want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, just through the chair. I think that's why we really waited for the advice from ASB, and unfortunately Tom couldn't be here today because he had a death in his family. But we did wait for that advice from ASB because we really wanted to put as much thinking behind as, where we could make the cutoff that's best for our ratepayers. So we really did look what was best for our ratepayers and what was best for, all of our customers. So that was why we waited to get advice from ASB around what they thought we should do. Yeah.
With ASB, they've not told us anything like that, and we're still receiving in cheques from the banks that still allow cheques to pay their memberships, and so we'll be, So I don't know, and they've not sent us any notification that that's going to happen any earlier, that they're not going to accept. Kiwi Bank has been out of receiving cheques for a long time now, but ASB haven't told us that.
Thank you, Hazel. I think Liz would like to say something.
Yeah, look, I think that for the elderly and those who still use cheques, this is going to be a really difficult time. There's no question about that, because this is a massive change to how people have been paying their bills for tens of years. But the simplest way and the I guess what staff are trying to do here is to keep it as simple as possible and have one communication. And they've said in their report, a comprehensive communications plan will be put together. And I guess if we change the date, what we'll be doing is adding more confusion. So what we have now is a date where no checks are accepted. Otherwise, we'll be trying to communicate some are accepted, some are not. Too confusing. So having one date, I think, is going to be simpler for everybody. And I know it's not an ideal outcome, Hazel, but I think simplicity in our communications has to be really clear. So I'm happy with the recommendation.
And look, can I just say, and yes, I believe we do have Amanda at the back of the room, and actually Charlotte at the back of the room, who obviously manage our wonderful customer services team. Our customer services team will be all over this. They are wanting to support our ratepayers and customers. So yeah, look, they will be a fantastic mechanism to support our community to make this adjustment. And like I say, I offer again in terms of grey power meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks on the LTP. Very, very happy to assist with any education that's required through that. We'll be rolling out a whole lot of comms as well. Charlotte's nodding her head at the back of the room. She's prepped and ready to go. So yeah, so we will look to support our customers through this, and particularly the groups that are most impacted. We are well aware of who is most impacted here.
That, but I'm just trying to say to you, that doesn't end there. And you can go out and you can do what you like, but at the end of the day, it comes to those volunteers of us out there in the community who they can contact and say, I've forgotten what he said. I've forgotten what I had to do. Because unfortunately, it's a sad fact that when you start to get a little bit aged, your memory is one of the first things that plays you up. And I believe at 40, it's starting to happen now, rather than waiting till you're 80. But that's the thing. And so but I agree with everything you've said. Madam Chair.
I might just have a few comments over in this corner.
I just had a question. Look, it's a tricky one. No matter what we do, we're going to either get ourselves in a logistical pickle with trying to, accept or reject checks that are or aren't acceptable, or we're going to obviously really cause significant or impose significant changes on the lives of a number of people in our community. So we're sort of between a rock and a hard place. But my question really was around the 1 month we've got in there to try and bring our people with us to understand how we will accept this money. Does Charlotte, are you confident that you've got a plan that will target and be effective? Because I mean, that's really what it comes down to, doesn't it? Whether we feel that we can actually walk alongside and help people get as best they can to this place.
Here, they've got to present themselves to get that. Yeah, you know that your steps, of course, and getting into this building, are the group of people that we're talking about are not necessarily able to run the mile in 2 minutes. And so it's kind of, yeah, it still comes back. I don't want to be moaning, but I'm just pointing out the real facts here. Is that
I think we've canvassed all of the issues pretty extensively, and I don't know if there's going to be any movement on the so Sarah, would you just like to
just sorry, one more thing through the chair. I just had to have a quick look at my data, but probably a good note as well to show the trend has further decreased. And I think Kiwi Bank probably going out of checks to help. So we have only received 420 checks this year for the payment so far. So and the actual number of ratepayers is likely to be much lower because there's been several instalments and some people pay for 3 or 4 different properties and rates and water. So the number affected is likely to be much lower. Just so that's just a note.
Councillor, I just wanted to add that we're more than happy to put together a brochure for your meeting, and happy to have a chat about what else we could do to support those customers, whether it's actually sit with them, come along to the meeting, whatever we can do to help them through this, we will support in whatever way we can.
Charlotte. Mike, did you want to say one last thing?
Really, it was just around the anxiety that you're talking about, and I guess that's only going to with the the banks are reducing. There's less and less banks. In time, I guess banks are probably going to disappear. So that's coming for. We are all going to be of the age that you're talking about when cash is gone, and we're all paying by having to use these things and all the rest of it. So I think these generations are all going to have their challenges, and at this point, this generation's got checks. But I'm happy to move the current recommendation.
Thanks, Mike. And do I have a seconder? Liz, thank you. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Okay, our next item are the CCO reports. So I was
just thinking if we really should have removed because Tom could we actually just
it's just been pointed out to me. I was rushing to get that resolution passed, and we needed to amend it by removing the clause C because the ASB representative was not actually able to attend. So are you happy to have that remove the people that moved and seconded? Okay, thank you. Happy with that? Cool. Okay, all right. So now we move on to Te Waka's 6-monthly report, and I'm welcoming Steve Schritt, hopefully, and someone else. Oh, Hamish is online. Hamish.
Madam Chair, how are you? If I drive this presentation can I drive this from my end, or do you need to drive it from your end?
With my technical team. No, there's a big shaking of the head.
No.
So you just have to say next slide if that's right. But welcome to our meeting, Hamish. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, and I'm sorry. My apologies. My apologies for not being there in person. I would much rather be there in person, and in fact, I'm there on Thursday for the day. So looking forward to spending some time in your wonderful community. Look, what I'm going to do is to run through, if I may, 9 or 10 slides pretty quickly, because what I'd like to do is actually leave time for question and answers and discussion.
Okay, thank you. Well, if you would just like to just let our governance lady know when you're ready to move on to the next slide, and I think she can handle that.
Fantastic. So if we go to that first slide, please. So look, and this will be familiar to many of you who have heard me present before, but a quick overview. It's been a pretty bumpy road for all of us in the last 12 months. As an EDA, by national standards, we're still trying to find our feet. We're a relatively young organisation. I think when Te Waka was established, the expectations that were put in place were very grand and very broad, but not particularly well managed or certainly aligned to the size and scale of the team versus the level of aspiration. I think we went and spent a lot of time at the behest of all of our stakeholders chasing the PGF pot of gold. And that was probably appropriate, but took an awful lot of time. And then COVID came along. So look, it's been an interesting 24, 36 months. I think from a point of view of our focus going forward, we see incredible potential in this region, probably more so than any other region in New Zealand. We've got huge natural attributes and possibilities, but we've got quite diverse communities. And what will work in Takaroa won't work in Whitianga. And the needs and the people and the demands are different. So we have diverse communities, but very, very significant potential. But that spread is also a challenge in that we have a complex region with the 11 TLAs and the interests that come with that and the boundaries that come with that, albeit business don't tend to reference boundaries, and the interests that come with that. There's just some natural limits to the nature of our stakeholders, and obviously local governments are an absolutely vital stakeholder for us, but as too is business, other business associations, and central government. So that's a challenge in terms of the complexity of the region, the nature of our populations and diverse interests. And also from our point of view, and this is not a call for money, our budget is very small by comparison to the national average. So we're a young EDA, we're just out of nappies. Our funding per capita is about $4 versus a $35 national average. So we do have a significantly smaller level of funding. Now there are funds from individual councils and other areas invested. So that's just in terms of EDA funding out of councils. We are one of the few councils and one of the few EDAs in the country to have business funding in place as well. So it is a challenge for us. I think, look, there's a lot that's changed in the last 12 months. We've had to very quickly, we almost doubled the team through COVID to respond to a moving target and moving need. And we all learned on the hoof as we went through that process. We've really, through that period of time, both tried to deliver to market need, but also to say, look, we've got to be really focused and ruthless in our strategy. Do we know what it is that creates impact? Where do we focus finite resource? How do we avoid that adage of being busy idiots trying to please everyone but achieving nothing? And so that's been a learning curve for us, but we've got there. And really we've had to, in many ways, have a new start with regard to some of our relationships and local government. The team had spent time in the market, but did we really have a genuine understanding of each council, each mayor, each CE, each councillor's needs? Did we have a clear view on a district by district basis of priorities? And were we then able to work in partnership with that in a collaborative manner to work on a shared vision of what's important, as opposed to everyone running around doing their own thing? So we've built far better understanding. Through that process, we've started to collaborate in a much better way, and we've come an awful long way. Are we fully match fit? Perhaps not. We're a long way from where we were, and I think we have accomplished quite a lot in the last 6 months in terms of direct investment and support, and in terms of rebasing the organisation. So look, the match fit point, despite our local government support, which is fantastic, and I know we need to get through the LTP process, but I'm very pleased to say that all of the councils have, I guess, reaffirmed a desire to have an EDA and a desire for our sense of direction and a desire for a continuation of the current support levels, which is fantastic. Regional Council is going to more than double its support, obviously subject to the LTP process. So there's strong local government commitment. But again, without being negative on anything, we put probably councils put 4 times the investment into HWT than they do into Te Waka at an overarching economic level. So we just have to recognise that's where we are and work with that, and we're partnering with HWT, but we've got to recognise where we are. Adequately staffing our team has been an ongoing challenge, and I sent an email update out last night to most of our stakeholders talking about challenges. We're about to go to market for a new chief executive, which is fantastic. I can't sign a contract with one yet until our funding's confirmed, but that's something we've got to work through. And we're also going to market on several other key roles. One is for a sector lead and project manager to replace Michelle Hollins. Michelle's been with us for the last two and a bit years, leading and driving our sector program, and in the last 18 months has made an incredible difference in driving our sector work, on top of the work she did in driving the communities of learning through the COVID process. Michelle and her husband have a number of businesses in the rehab space, and that business focus is expanding, and that really is taking more and more of her time and attention, which is why she's moving on. And she's going to do a little bit of work with Oklahoma, I think, in terms of support, which is close to home, but albeit continued friend of Te Waka and engaged. So we're hiring a new manager in that area. We're also looking to hire in our investment facilitation and our regional economic development areas to bolster out our strategy. And as of yesterday, we've actually appointed Amanda, who's on the screen in the background, as our acting chief executive to take us through the next 2 or 3 months while we go through those appointment processes. So we've come a long way. Staffing the team has been a challenge, just in terms of resource workload and fundamentally the size of our budget. As we've got our own house in order and been clear on strategy, we've had to limit what we can actually do in market based on the team that we have, because by and large, what we do as a highly focused team is we invest time, which is relationship and people driven, to identify and facilitate economic development as opposed to try and do everything ourselves. But we're very confident on where we're heading and what we need to do. Next slide, if we could, please. I'll skip over this very quickly. We've talked about work on actually genuinely engaging with understanding stakeholders. We've had to focus on where we create impact. And again, that means we have to choose projects where we can make a difference as opposed to be busy in every project that comes along. And we've had to work quite strongly around the resourcing model in terms of the funding and the budget to get back to the start line 1st of July. Next slide, please. Thank you. So look, I touched on our strategy. We've got 4 central PO that we are very clear on in terms of our mind, in terms of the things that we must do. The first is sector development and priority business. This is the largest scale sectors and businesses that we believe we can support to create impact. And there's 4 that we're working on, and there's 3 adjacencies. The first one is around logistics and distribution, where there's very significant opportunity that drives other industry in this region, and it's a central North Island play. The second is construction, where we've been working pretty closely around both with both horizontal and vertical constructors. The third has been in and around education, which is focused to date around international education. And the fourth is IT and innovation, where we're looking at generally the technology base across a range of industries. There's work programs specifically in those 4 sectors because that's where we felt we needed to start. We're also looking at healthcare, agri and agri-tech, and advanced manufacturing as 3 adjacent sectors. You'll note that agriculture is not on that list. It's probably the biggest and most important sector. We are trying to be aware of what's happening in that sector, but our view is there's a lot of people doing a lot of work already in agri. The technology aspect of that is something we think we can add value to, but let's not try and do stuff that other people are doing really well. So those are the 4 central pillars in terms of the sector development. So the second is regional engagement, which ties into very deliberate programs of regional engagement with key local stakeholders, being councils, business associations, businesses and other groups, to make sure we're working to build an understanding. And then we're working towards a collaborative program to provide support in market. That is more than our regional business partner program. That program is delivered with NZT and Callaghan funding. That's a complementary program and a level of support that we can bring. But our regional engagement strategy, which Amanda's been leading for the last 4 or 5 months, is very specifically based on regional understanding, regional collaboration. The business support network will provide additional base to that. The third point is the Māori economic development, where we've hired a new program director in that area. We're making very solid progress in terms of our MOUs and joint ventures with particular iwi and hapu, and we've made very specific progress around our what we're calling social procurement agenda, which is front and forward with government. But our focus there is Māori enterprise, not so much iwi, but we need to do a significant relationship build there to make sure we're working in an appropriate manner with iwi and hapu. And the fourth PO is investment facilitation. We deliberately put on hold the decision to hire an investment manager last year because a generic sales pitch on investment we didn't feel was the right thing. Our view is that actually, as we go through our sector work and our regional engagement work, we will identify specific opportunities where we go to market around specific opportunities to specific investors in a very targeted way, and we're looking to lift our game there. So those are the 4 pillars. The must-haves, frankly, stay in business, continuing to make sure we gather intelligence and insights, and our some work out last week on the IT and innovation sector. The research on market sentiment will be out in the next few days, and then a bunch of other work coming through. That enables us to advocate on behalf of the region on specific issues to Wellington and elsewhere, and then continuing to work on those other aspects of partnerships, collaboration, and being a well-managed organisation. Next slide, please. I can't see any of you, I'm sorry, because I can only see the screen. So if anyone's screwing up their faces, my apologies. I'll take questions in a minute. In terms of where we are against the strategy, look, simple traffic light, really good progress in some areas. Sector development has moved very strongly. Our regional engagement is in many ways green. We've come a long way, but there's more to go. Our Māori economic development agenda is moving forward, again, early days. Investment facilitation has been done quietly in the background, but an area that we wish to move forward on. Continuing our work in intelligence, insights and advocacy, continuing to build more around partnerships and collaboration, and that is more around, we have a shared view now on what that looks like. It actually needs to be delivered in action. And look, still a bit of a brickbat around the nature of where we are in terms of financial capability. Next slide, please. In terms of support specifically into the district, and again, these are high-level numbers. I'm happy to take any questions. I don't have all of the details in front of me. The COVID support package from March through to December of last year put close to 700,000 into the district. The tourism fund has put 35,000 in terms of capability funding out of our business growth partners team, close to 45,000, and another 40,000 in terms of Callaghan's. So in terms of periods, a little bit overlapping there, but close to 800,000 of funding into the broader district, and happy to try and dig into that offline if we need to. In terms of the business growth team, again, specific activities and engagements across 240 businesses during the last calendar year. And that slowed down very much in the beginning of this year with inquiries, but 13 new registrations and 15 engagements specifically in the January-February period, and we're currently collating that March data, and a mix of the type of advice that we've provided through that area. So that's more what I'll call our grassroots support that sits alongside our sector and other work. Next slide, please. The sentiment survey, which I mentioned a minute ago, will be released probably sometime during the course of next week. And thank you to the support we've had through the ED team within the district. We've had 565 respondents, 56 through Waipa, so 10% through Waipa, which is fantastic actually, and a real mix of business owners and senior managers coming through. The interesting thing there is we've seen net confidence move both within the region and within New Zealand very significantly. So the Waikato region is now at an 8% number versus -14 6 months ago, and New Zealand at -3 versus -31. Good solid confidence in own businesses and forecasting in those areas going forward, but still a number of people looking to skill shortages and other areas and challenges. The update that I have sent to a number of our stakeholders last night, which I'll make sure that Amanda circulates to all of you, references, I guess, a comment that I made, which is the calm before the storm. We are seeing very significant and serious signals across a number of industries. Certainly with tourism and hospitality, it's been major. Massive issues now rising in key parts of horticulture, particularly around the ability to manage crops with staffing. And we now have a very significant issue, which has been, I guess, hidden from plain sight, around the supply chain and the impact of that. And with the Ever Given ship stranded in the Suez Canal in the last couple of weeks, there's a bit more talk around that. And with Carter Holt in terms of their timber supply. But there are serious supply chain issues that are starting to have material impact across New Zealand businesses. And probably that's one of the biggest worries that we have. So in many ways, lots of optimism over the long, hot summer. Some worrying signals, and those signals are amplifying, and we need to be very conscious of what those might look like going forward. So just look that sense of let's not get over optimistic around where we are. We haven't actually hit the worst of it by any means yet. Next slide, please. I think the next 3 slides, I won't go into detail. It just goes into specifics around the Waipa district, and I'll let you look at those offline. And if you do have queries, please come back to Amanda. If we could go forward to the last slide, which is just the bullet point slide, please. And then I'll move to questions. One more. So look, in terms of collaboration, I've talked around our need. If we go back one, if you wouldn't mind, if I've talked about the importance of collaboration, and look, we're coming off a base which has been imperfect. We're working forward very deliberately. There's been some specific work around our Māori economic development and what's happening in that area with Jason Napier, our new ED manager in that area. And there is a bunch of other areas of discussion with the local ED team, specifically around identifying, understanding and working together on economic goals and actions that are relevant to the Waipa area. And building that understanding is pretty key. If I close on a couple of comments, obviously there's a lot of noise coming out of Wellington and a whole bunch of areas at the moment. We've worked pretty closely with key stakeholders back to minister level over the last 2 or 3 months. Obviously the provincial growth fund has gone. There's talk of a new $200 million grant being made, or package being made, put in place to support economic development, nowhere near what the PGF was. The cabinet paper around that, I believe, goes to cabinet next week. It's likely that government is looking at a regional approach at how it allocates those funds, rather than looking at surge regions. Our understanding is that they're going to look at regions based on population, which means the Waikato region should get a better share of the pie than it has previously. And they're looking at then regional leadership around how do we identify need and opportunity and allocate funds. So they are looking at a regionally led approach as opposed to looking at individual, individual districts. It's really important in doing that, though, that regional approach is coordinated and involves the views and inputs from many districts and from many stakeholders. So that's something we're just trying to better understand at the moment. Over the next 60 days, Amanda, with some of our team, is working very specifically on a piece of work to district by district identify from all key buckets of stakeholders key commercial projects and opportunities that are relevant to economic development. So we have a really good snapshot of what's out and around the region, and then that'll help us by the time we get to the end of May, which is when this is going to be hitting the ground, to be able to then talk in a much better way with central government and others around where we see priorities. But we will absolutely engage and bring that back to conversations with individual stakeholders and individual communities. So that's a complete assurance. So look, Madam Chair, I'll leave that there. I guess maybe if we just hand over to questions, happy to take any and all questions. And if I can't answer them, we can come back with more detail.
Thank you, Hamish. That's great. So any questions? Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Hamish. Mike Peters. Just a question. You touched on the wood supply chain issue, and I guess that wood being picked up by places like China, and I guess in time maybe America sucking all that wood out, and then and the likes of Bunnings and Mitre 10 maybe having supply issues with getting wood. What's your take on the effect of that on the sort of wider building industry and the knock-on effect on that? Do you think there'll be much, or is it just a little blip?
Mike, I'll answer you in two ways. And look, I'm chairman of the GJ Gardner business in North Waikato, South Auckland. So, we build 200 to 300 houses a year up here, and I'm acutely aware of that. I think, so I come at it from that angle a little bit. I think there's a lot of hype here around this story, number one. The reality is we have plenty of fibre in our forests, and we have plenty of ability to cut fibre. It's the nature of how we process that fibre into structural timber in particular, and who sells it. And there's without being too direct, there's an observation on the nature of key providers and key retailers and wholesalers of that product that I think factors a little bit into the circumstance we find ourselves in. And there are some quite strong views in the background of how that program or how this might evolve politically. So just a really interesting one in terms of how real is this and what is driving it. And there's a range of factors. The timber, the fibre is there to supply New Zealand. The processing capacity is there. So what's actually the problem we're trying to solve here? I'm not sure that's necessarily accurately portrayed in the media yet. I think in terms of impact, I think the comment, Mike, I made a minute ago around supply chain, this underpins it fundamentally. We're looking at building houses. We're looking at providing strong domestic growth. We're looking at all these areas. If we don't have builders or key materials, you simply can't build houses. And we are already seeing, we have been for 3 or 4 months, key large group builders struggling to get washing machines and dryers and roofing materials and other key components where they are imported. That's for the last several months. You see something like an Ever Given and an ongoing impact on trade flow, let alone the backlogs that already exists in ports, let alone self-interested markets and what they might be doing around key materials where demand is massively ebbing and flowing. The supply chain situation represents a very serious risk to the New Zealand economy. And every district should be understanding the businesses and the employers in each district and saying, what companies do we have in our markets that are heavily exposed to supply chain risk? do they understand and are they aware of that impact, and are we more consciously aware of the broader impact on our communities and those that are there and the well-beings and employment of those communities? So I think it has the, quite aside from what's actually happening in the way it's being portrayed in the media, a supply chain shortage in key building materials is a real risk to industry. It's been around for several months and it's accelerating, but that story will expand to a whole range of different industries where you've simply got, even where you're getting a component to manufacture. We don't manufacture washing machines in New Zealand anymore, but let's say we're relying on a key motor to come out of China to do that. A, can we get it? B, how long is it going to take to get here? Because there's been a significant move around capacity in shipping, and see what's it going to cost to ship it, because the cost of that shipping is making a huge difference as well. So the key freight owners, the Fonterras of this world, which have dedicated channels and supply chains, they can move product and they can do so with a degree of management on cost. Those that are in the middle that rely very heavily on volumes are going to find both the supply chain fundamentally constrained at the source, fundamentally constrained around the availability of shipping, and also fundamentally constrained around the cost of shipping. And that could flow very significantly into the availability and the costs of goods and the economic viable of some of the companies that are in those manufacturing sectors. So pretty significant. Long answer, I'm sorry, but that's the one that keeps me awake the most at night.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Hamish. Any other questions? Yes, Bronwyn. Kia ora.
Madam Chair. Just in terms of the financials, I think you noted that you've been around now for about 2.5 years. So at some stage, will you look to come back to us and present some financials?
The annual report, we don't normally present our financial statements back to councils per se, because we're not a CCO that's owned by councils. I'm very happy to share those, councillor, at a high level anyway. There's nothing there that we're not willing to share. In effect, Te Waka runs at a break-even level, and there's no profit in that business. Our overall budget's about $2 million a year. At a revenue line, about half of that comes from our government contract with NZT and Callaghan and support that's come through that. Of the remaining $1 million, about 300,000 comes from local councils, and about another 370 comes from regional councils. So it's a relatively small revenue line. The allocation of the spend there, which I'm happy to share offline, is really primarily in and around people and activities, and that's been pretty ruthlessly focused to our 4PO and the key work programs in the last 6 months. What I would say though is, and this is part of what we're currently working on, we're incredibly grateful for the support that we're getting out of the TAs in terms of a recommitment of the 300,000 we're getting from the 10 TAs across the region. I know that compares with 1.2 million that the region's giving to Hamilton and Waikato tourism, so it's a small proportion. And we know we can't come back to the well for us for more because the well's empty. But I do think the point here is that, look, we've looked at what we believe a minimum viable proper delivery of economic development looks like for the year ahead, and our budget needs to be 3 million, and over the next 2 to 3 years it needs to be closer to 4 million. I think the reference point I made there around investing $4 per capita versus 35 at a national average is just a fundamental issue that we face. If Te Waka was funded at the national average, we would be probably having an annual budget of $17-18 million versus 2. We don't want to be big and busy idiots, but we do need to be closer to 4 to have a minimum viable delivery of service effectively. And right now, with our budget for next year, we're struggling to get to 2, and we probably need to be closer to 3. So that's something the board is grappling with. We're talking to regional council about that. We're also talking to central government about that, and we're talking to business about that to work very actively around what needs to be true for us to do this job properly.
And Philip.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Hamish, for your report. It's Philip Coles. You talked about shipping. What's your thoughts on the impact of the Suez Canal?
Well, there's a much broader, Philip. There's a much broader underlying issue here, which is supply chain. we've already had an existing massive issue across ports around the world with backlogs, in terms of a backlog in shipping, and therefore heavy peaks and troughs across ports. The Suez issue, in talking to one or two shipping commentators, there's going to be a little bit of a lull, which maybe allows some ports to catch up, but then there's a massive wave coming back through. So look, it's all a contributor, but the broader issue of supply chain difficulties tie back to A, fundamental supply out of different countries, B, the availability of shipping lines and willingness to come to various places, and C, therefore the impact on costs. So one of the biggest issues for New Zealand will be a lot of shippers simply don't have the volumes to make it economic to come here anymore. So the availability of ships in the first instance, and then for those that are available, the cost of that shipping has the potential to move quite significantly. So Suez is, it's a massive fly in the ointment. It will not help, but there's a very significant underpinning issue there that's been around for the last 9 months through COVID anyway.
Okay, thank you. All right, so there doesn't seem to be any more questions. So we have a recommendation there to receive the report. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Philip. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Hamish. It's been great to have your input and the benefit of your insights as well. And we wish you all the best, and no doubt we'll be having you come back another time to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, councillors. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Okay, so now our next item, the council-controlled organisations with their statements of intent and the 6 monthly reports. This is on page 31 of our agenda. Is it Sarah? You're back. Welcome.
Yes. Good afternoon again, Madam Chair and councillors. So I won't go into too much detail with my report, because we do have representatives from each organisation here today, and they're obviously the experts in their statement of intents and CCOs. But it is that time of year again to look at the CCO statement of intents, their draft statement of intents, and their 6-month reports. So we've summarised it in our report body, as well as provide the full documents in the appendixes. My main note, I suppose, you will be approving today as part of your recommendations, the draft letters back to in support of the statement of intent. So those are there. Other than that, I will hand over to each representation. So we'll go one at a time, and then questions at the end. So I think we are starting with Mark Morgan. Yep, the CEO of Waikato Regional Airport. Just one of you here.
Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much, Chair. Afternoon, Council. Control. It's dangerous. Okay. We'll find out very shortly.
So I think you've got the same.
Right, I'll do it from the page down maybe. So look, whoops. So no, I didn't even touch anything. I'm happy to talk on it though, if you'd like me to. Great. So look, you've received our 6-monthly update ending December last year, as well as our draft statement of intent. So I don't obviously intend to talk too much today about that, but happy to take questions afterwards. I've got a very short presentation here, only 5 or 6 slides, just to give you a bit of a feel for how we've survived last year, and more importantly, what we're doing over the next kind of 6 months, and in fact, calendar year. So as shareholders of the airport group, not a great year last year to own an airport and to own a hotel, but we've come through that extraordinarily well. And I think that's my first comment there, that the group performance did exceed our expectations. So we still delivered a profit for FY20, not the profit that we thought we would achieve. We were on record, sorry, we were on target for a record year ending June 20. but we still managed to be profitable in that year. And given the fact that we had a devastating impact from late March, of course, with lockdown, where we virtually had no passenger activity for about 6 weeks. I guess that's really the credit to the board, I think, and to management over the past 5 years, that our diversification strategy that you as a shareholder signed off on some years ago, which was principally a non-aeronautical strategy, has, we actually designed that strategy around the risk to the aeronautical business from, I guess, a reduction in air services. In fact, we didn't predict the pandemic, but it had the same result. And what we've managed to achieve through that diversification is that we're not we don't have one string to our bow. We have multiple strings, and we had a record farm harvest that dropped a lot of cash into the business in April. The government took over the hotel as a managed isolation facility. Passenger numbers recovered, and in fact we had a record year for property for land sales that didn't settle in the 6 months, but we had $7 million worth of land sales during that period, and all bar one of them continued through the uncertainty of COVID to settle. So the emerging risks are really in our general aviation business, and of course we have lost L3, the flight school. Principally, the obvious reasons that the requirement for pilot pipelines globally, of course, is severely reduced. But in fact, the key issue here was the lack of government response around allowing trainee pilots across the border last year. So we were the largest flight school in New Zealand, training about 250 pilots a year. It was survivable at about 125, but by the beginning of this year, the numbers were down to 100. And we could not get any approvals from government, of course, to bring pilots in. So L3 have retrenched from New Zealand. I don't expect to see them back again. And that's, of course, been a significant hit to the airport, but in fact, a much wider hit to the region. We estimate about 80 million a year to the Waikato region as a result of the loss of the flight school. And of course, we have the current liquidation of Pacific Aerospace, and I'm not in a position today to speak too much about that, other than to say we are working with the liquidators on trying to salvage a sale of that business. But again, that has been the loss of 100 jobs, and those employees were terminated about 6 weeks ago. So not good in the general aviation space. Oh, is it? So is it that one?
Yep.
There we go. So look, this just articulates the financial performance I mentioned earlier on. So you can see the impact of, and really to explain that graph, the blue part of the bar is our aeronautical profitability, and the green comes from our non-aeronautical interests. So you can see there that even in FY20 with COVID, we still managed a small profit from our aeronautical business. But I think the key point here is that we will have a record profitability for FY21. So we're on track for a net profit before tax of a little over $4 million. And FY22 is also shaping up well. So again, just on the back of very strong recovery in Air New Zealand, and I'll show you some of those numbers shortly. And of course, the fact that the government has got the hotel as a managed isolation facility has made a significant impact on our financial performance. More than offsetting some of the concerns I mentioned around general aviation with the loss of the landing fees around L3 and of course Pacific Aerospace. In New Zealand, we are one of the few ports, we're certainly the only regional port that now is ahead of prior year, ahead of pre-COVID passenger numbers. So in fact, in March, the current month we're in, we will have an all-time record of about 38,000 passengers through the terminal. So we recovered very quickly. We recovered back to about 70% of pre-COVID passenger activity, passenger numbers by September last year. And with the exception of February, that was slightly softer, every month from November on was in fact ahead of prior year. So in New Zealand have increased capacity. You see now that we have basically 26 flights every weekday in and out, and we have seen our capacity for Wellington up about 14% and Christchurch up 26% from mid-February. And all flights now are essentially the ATR, the 68-seater aircraft out of Hamilton. So very strong growth. I now expect actually that during calendar year, or if the financial year FY22, we will be back ahead of pre-COVID passenger numbers, which were about 400,000. Of course, the downside is we've lost almost more than 50% of our general aviation flight activity. I'll get this right by the end of the presentation. So look, just very, very quickly, a couple of areas we're focused on. We are still developing, and I just want to re-emphasise to you that we are still a net acquirer of land. So while we're selling land, we're recycling that capital into income generating assets for the airport or indeed other land acquisitions that are more strategic. But we will open start to develop the final stage of Central Precinct Stage 5. So that's the land really just beside Pacific Aerospace and back down to the current Aussie James Road extension. That'll be completed and titles issued about this time next year. And that should provide a pipeline of land for about the next 2 to 3 years. We're working on the Northern Precinct plan change, so that's the 100-hectare farm. Obviously, we're working with your council around that plan change, and we hope to lodge the plan change towards the end of this year. So we're working very closely with all stakeholders involved in that plan change. It's quite significant. It's probably about $1 million of investment in preparing for that plan change by the airport company. But as far as the board and I see it, that is a major opportunity for the airport over the next 20, 25 years in terms of not only the sale of land, but equally importantly, the retention of land and the development of design builds that are retained by the airport company. The other point of note there is the Terminal Resilience Project. That was the investment in strengthening and refurbishing the terminal that was put on hold as a result of COVID. I have an agreement with Air New Zealand that we would recommission that work by June 2022, subject to a number of KPIs being met. Those KPIs have been met, and we are currently considering, in conversation with the board and with Air New Zealand, that we may bring that work forward. There is a window of opportunity, albeit the conversations we've heard today on construction and risk around supply chain. We may well look to bring that project forward prior to June 2022. That will be fully funded by the airport company, and we have strong projections in terms of our cash flow and our options to ensure that we stay within our debt ceiling, and we won't be coming to our shareholders for any funding if that as a result. And the other point there is the hotel. We are working with the MB and with the Jet Park team around the contractual extension of the MIQ through to April 2022. Most border employees of MB have had their contracts extended to June 2022, so that gives you an indication that the government doesn't see any substantive or change in the MIQ facilities, certainly over the next 12 months. And then finally, we are working on our runway designation. Again, very much involves this council. Our current runway designation expires in 2026, and we're now starting to form a view as to how we either give effect to or seek an extension to that designation. So we've got a 5-year program of work leading up to that 2026 period. Just very briefly around sustainability, very much a part of our 2021-2022 focus of my team. We are part of the Airport Carbon Accreditation Program. We're seeking level 1 of that program this year. And then that moves very much into some of the social conscience aspects. We recently, I don't know if any of you ran the runway, but we recently had 400 people running the runway, which was a Rotary fundraiser. We've just joined Mystery Creek with Predator Free in that area. A new ticketless entry, so its license plate recognition into the airport has now saved about 100 to 150,000 printed tickets. So quite a bit going on in that space. And look, so really, I guess, summary conclusions for you, and I pretty much restating some of the important comments I've made. One, the diversification of the group means that we are and have been very resilient. Whilst we don't want to be overconfident, and Hamish in his previous comment made reference, and I hold the same view, that we're not through this yet. But we certainly are in a good place to manage the next couple of years for the group's performance. I see no change to passenger numbers. I think, ironically, when the border opens up, we may well lose some passenger volume because a number of people in this region are flying domestically when they can't fly internationally. So, however, the corporate market hasn't fully returned, so we'll see how that offsets. We have a plan to spend about $3 million in capital expenditure on our aeronautical assets over the next 2 years. That will continue as planned. And I've already mentioned the property initiatives. And of course, the key point is that we are very prudently managing the asset that is owned by you. So that's my key points.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions? Oh, yes, Roger.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and congratulations on a great result. Tremendous. There's been a lot of talk about the possibility of a bubble with some offshore country, and there has been commentary that perhaps the separation of those two or the various inbound markets that separate one to Hamilton and leave all the other rabble into Auckland. Any comment on that?
Look, I think the reality is that won't happen. I think we've got a high degree of uncertainty for not only the Trans-Tasman bubble, Pacific bubble, but I think that you've got airlines that are in survival mode, and they are going to fly to their recognised and reliable points of travel. So that won't be, there's certainly never been any discussion at government level that I'm aware of that they want to separate. In fact, quite the opposite. The work has gone in at Auckland Airport, which has been ready now for some months, contrary to perhaps some political commentary, that with their green and red lanes, they've completely separated the terminal to deal with those that are travelling from a bubble versus those that are coming in from other parts of the world. So, and I think the government are very fixated on Auckland as the point of entry for those reasons.
Thank you. Oh, yes, Mike.
Thanks for that, Mark. Really good presentation. A little bit of a different question, and I'm not sure if you're directly in control of it, but I use the Hamilton Airport, frequently enough, and the odd time I've had to catch a taxi, as I've had to do, say, in Wellington. And what disturbs me is the amount I pay to get from Hamilton Airport to Cambridge, say, as opposed to getting from Wellington Airport into the city centre. So yeah, just give us some feedback around the lack of options there for the general punter.
Firstly, no control over what the taxis charge. So they're sovereign businesses and they make their own decisions other than their costs, their operating costs, because they operate from the airport, are not extensive. So they pay a flagful fee. So certainly that hasn't, if you like, jacked up the price. All I would say that from the airport, of course, we also have not only have the taxis, there is an Uber service for those that want to use an Uber service. I don't know how much more or not they are competitively priced to the taxis. And then that's essentially it. But we'd love you to park in the car park.
And Mark, I do that 99% of the time,
Right.
particularly after my last taxi ride. Probably 100% of the time.
Liz, and then Bronwyn.
Yeah, look, Mark, hey, thanks so much for coming in today. I just want to say what a great effort. When we went into, I guess, COVID lockdown, I was seriously worried about the airport because, you know, it didn't look like it was going to be a great outcome, to be fair. But, you know, interesting enough, you know, you come out the other end and look at what you've been able to produce. I guess when you look at, you know, the accommodation, the luck, maybe not luck, but kind of luck, I guess the association with Jet Park,
Yes.
you know, really has cemented the profit that we see now. And yeah, just really wrecked for you that this has been the outcome for you at the end of the year. So it's looking really promising going forward. I know you've got some, you know, some issues around Pacific Aerospace and hopefully the flight school, you know, and they're not coming back, but maybe there's something else.
Somebody else,
be, you know,
sure.
Exactly. Another plan in place at some point. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
And yeah, good luck.
Thank you. And Bronwyn.
Oh, kia ora. Kia ora, Mark. Thanks very much for that. I suppose I was just interested in some context around the decision around the dividend policy as to why you're looking at that. I'm sure you get that question all the time. And then just on the second question, just around the level of debt, can't quite sort of get a sense of what that is. So a really nice balance sheet, some good funds there. I suppose I'm just querying why there's no dividend and what the debt
Sure.
repayment.
This is when you need your chairman beside you, isn't it? Look, firstly, if I deal with the easier part of the, obviously at the 6 month, we don't give the full financial update. It is available in the sense that our current debt level is $11 million. Our current facility is $30 million with the BNZ. We expected that our debt would be at about 16 million when we forecast out a year ago. So COVID has helped that in the sense that our cash flow has been much better than we thought, and we obviously deferred some capital works as well. In completing the terminal refurbishment, we will go very close to our debt headroom, but we have a view that that we must at least have headroom of a year's cash flow, operating cash flow for the business. And also that does include the banks, if you like, are back open for business. So the BNZ, for argument's sake, we're indicating, you know, that normally when you're at $25, $30 million worth of debt, you start to look at a dual relationship. The BNZ, for argument's sake, are very much keen to continue to fund us. So, and I think that speaks to our performance and our ownership. In respect to the dividend policy, of course, that's set by the board. It's not set by me. The decision, of course, last year was made in the wake of COVID when dividends are decided prior to the annual general meeting. Obviously, we were still very much amongst COVID. You can see that our financial performance is likely to be very strong. Equally, we have a lot of investment if we move ahead with the terminal. So I think that, but what I would recommend that obviously, and in fact we have an update with all of the shareholding mayors and CEs straight after Easter, after our April board meeting, and I guess it's an opportune time then for the mayors to have that conversation with the board. But the decision is normally made about September of each year prior to the November AGM.
No more questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming here and presenting to us. And yeah, again, yeah, congratulations on a really promising report. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, everyone. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome Waikato Lass next. So I think Calvin and Peter both, I can move out of the way.
Welcome. Kelvin, and is it Peter? Yes, welcome. And we look forward to hearing your, updating us, on the LAS's activities.
Madam Chair, if I could just briefly say, just before Kelvin starts, I'm the chairman of Rotorua's Airport Company, and I just wanted to say that as an outsider looking in, you're extremely well served by the chief executive of the airport you part own. Very good performance.
Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Madam Chair, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about Waikato LAS. So you've been provided with the half-yearly report and our 2021 statement of intent. These documents provide a picture of where we've, I guess, come from most recently, and more importantly, where we plan to go to in the future. We think we've made substantial progress in 2020, and we plan to do that in 2021 and beyond. Look, we've got a small team, but I think we've achieved a significant amount. We've set up foundations for success. We've got a new performance framework, which was introduced in last year's SOI. We've got a robust process for developing opportunities through to business case. We're continually developing how we engage with council, chief executives, and other staff, and we've continued to develop how we resource projects, which has included common arrangements with council staff, including staff from this council, one of whom is sitting in the back corner over there, Leanne. So look, for all of that, I should say that we've had those structural changes, foundational changes, and they've allowed us to deliver successful business cases, we believe. So we've delivered a case to expand RATA into waters asset management. We have continued to evolve regional GIS services with Waikato OneView, and you may be aware that we have a project underway at the moment around capturing regional LiDAR data sets as part of the PGF initiative in the last couple of months, well, a couple of years. In the last 12 months, we've established 2 new service offerings, LAS Water Services and Waikato Regional Infrastructure Procurement. We've got 5 opportunities currently under development at different stages of development, and we continue to deliver good operational outcomes for councils that provide them with savings. The collective approach to insurance arrangements and the evaluation of data services being 2 examples of these. For all of that, it's fair to say that we have undoubtedly faced some challenges, and I would categorise those into 5 areas. First, resistance to change is hardwired into middle management of many of the shareholder councils, and that is not unique to councils. We see that in pretty much any organisation. And the pace at which chief executives wish to move differs. Secondly, the prioritisation councils place on LAS is at best ambiguous and at worst counterproductive to what we're trying to achieve. Staff will do what they're measured on and where they're told to focus their time. Business as usual is a killer of projects, and as a project-orientated organisation, that creates some difficulties for us. Staff need to be informed that LAS projects are important to their council and should be supported. Flowing directly from that is resourcing. So we continue to remain heavily reliant on council resources to progress initiatives, and the capacity of council staff to help on LAS projects is therefore critical. Fourthly, the potential for change within councils from LAS initiatives must be managed effectively. We can ensure that we're communicating effectively as we can with councils, but we're still reliant on those key messages being clearly communicated by strong leaders within the councils themselves. And finally, I guess we're in your faced with an increasing uncertainty with waters reforms and RMA reforms and a central government that's got a mandate to do a whole lot more. And some chief executives, our sense is that they are worried by what that means for their councils in the future. And so the prospect of Waikato LAS coming along and looking to undertake further transformation through some of our initiatives becomes increasingly daunting for some of those chief executives. We think that there's a central solution to meeting all these challenges. Council chief executives must actively support the company to develop the best possible business case for each idea as fast as practicable. And they must impress their support on their staff. The faster we can develop good business cases, the faster those councils who want to can adopt the idea. We're not doing anything different from what we said that we were going to do, or indeed what the councils asked us to do a couple of years back when we set out on a transformational journey. We don't think we're doing anything different from what the councils themselves want to achieve. We just think about it in a regional sense rather than on a council by council basis. That natural alignment between LAS and your council, and indeed all councils, needs to be conveyed to staff. So just finally, looking to the future, we want to and will continue to identify and develop priority projects that challenge you and other councils to think differently, save costs and improve the way that you engage with your communities. My vision for LAS is that it is seen by Waikato councils as an enabler for you to continually improve the way that you deliver services. My aspiration is that when someone thinks of a Waikato council, their immediate thought is that's how councils should all be. Why can't they all be like that? And that LAS has played a small part in getting you to that point. So for that reason, we're going to continue to advance a transformational agenda. That's where we believe the greatest value lies. Your council's a critical partner to LAS. You strongly support the company through the provision of resources for opportunity development, and I know that your senior leaders get the need for transformation and for local government to carve its own destiny, which is something LAS firmly believes is the right thing to do. We continue to believe that LAS provides an excellent vehicle for councils to work together and share costs of developing ideas to meet the outcomes we're all looking for. Ngā mihi, Peter.
Thanks, Kelvin. Madam Chair, just a couple of additional observations. Just maybe to remind you all that LAS fundamentally is set up as a regional ideas laboratory and service delivery agent to help councils effect transformational change in two areas. One, to be more cost effective and efficient in the provision of the services that you provide, and secondly, to provide a better service to your customers. Calvin's talked about some of the challenges that we've experienced, and I think it's also fair to say that we've had some learnings of our own in the course of the last year as well, and I'd probably say that there are briefly 5 of them. First of all, we continue to need to do a better job in terms of communicating the value that we add, and that's an ongoing experience for us. Secondly, we need to continue to be as supportive as we can of chief executives to help them manage change. Not only within their organisation, but within the sector, because as you know, the sector is changing and will change rapidly, I think, very quickly. Thirdly, we continue to believe that there is an incredibly bright future for local authorities in New Zealand, and it's incumbent on us to continue to paint that picture for the chief executives particularly. In addition, in terms of the business cases that we develop for the ideas that we generate, we need to do a better job on an ongoing basis in terms of making sure that those business cases are as compelling as possible. And finally, one of the best lessons I think we've learned is that one of the best ways in order to get buy-in for the ideas is actually to try and encourage our chief executives to become sponsors of some of the projects that we're developing. And I think that we've both discovered that that's been incredibly valuable. And I did want to say, and I can say this in his absence without him being embarrassed, that we've asked Gary to be the project sponsor for probably our flagship project, which is what we're calling Shifting Landscapes, which is fundamentally looking to see what might the future of local government in the region look like. And I have to say that Gary's attacked that with a considerable degree of enthusiasm and competence, and we're incredibly lucky to have him sponsoring that project for the organisation. So, Madam Chair, that's all I really wanted to say, but thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, Bronwyn, yes.
Kia thank you very much for your presentation. I'm wondering if you could just give us a sense of, I suppose, the funding models or the cost outlays in relation to the GIS Excellence Centre, and the same for the Asset Management Excellence Centre, how you propose that might look like.
So the GIS is I guess it's in a development phase. So we started off with the Waikato data portal, so that went live April 2019, and has been up and running. So that's in a hold and maintain, if you like, at the moment. I think the costs across all participating councils is about 30 grand per annum. And in totality, I should say, not each. The second stage of that project is what we refer to as Waikato One View. That's got a cost of development of 200K, which has already been approved. So that project is well underway. The allocation of that cost is a combination of, as is with quite a few of our cost allocations, our initiatives, a product of size of council plus a fixed component as well. So we have regard to how large the council is, as well as a fixed component, which is 25%. Recognising that all the councils, irrespective of size, are receiving a benefit. The Centre of Excellence that is talked about in the SOI is yet to be costed, and so I mentioned in my presentation about the fact that we have a process that we go through in terms of developing any idea. The first phase of that is discovery phase, and that is essentially done in-house, which and lays out the strategic case on whether it's worth the board agreeing to take something forward. But the important thing is that the discovery phase is done at minimal cost, if no cost at all, so it's internal only. And the whole point is that we want to go through that exercise and make sure that there is a genuine case for developing that project before we're asking the councils to commit any funding to it. So I can't actually say to you what the cost of the GIS is.
It's fine. I was really just trying to get an idea of your ideal situation, given it's a centre of excellence, and what sort of you might, so no cost bar, what would it sort of look like?
So look, I mean, I need to be careful here because I don't like jumping to solutions. We try and identify what the problem is that we're solving. But look, the reality is there's 12 councils in the Waikato, and they are of varying sizes. In the context of GIS, very few of them have in-house GIS capability. So it is how do we actually think about notwithstanding the capability is in pockets, they all have needs, right? So how do we get the councils that don't have that capability in-house to be able to access and leverage that resource that's elsewhere in the Waikato region? We talk about centres of excellence. That is it's virtual, right? So if I talk about a centre, I'm not suggesting that everyone's in one room somewhere in the Waikato region. I mean, we're all subject to new ways of working now and very attuned with them, right? So, but it is how do we take the resource that's sitting across the region and actually make the best use of that to maximise its output for the benefit of all Waikato councils and communities.
Thank you. So no other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. You've given us a really nice insight into the work you're doing. I wish you well with your transformational journey. Yeah, and look forward to hearing from you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are we going on to the 8th-month report? No? Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry. So we need a... Oh, yeah. I'm just getting told what to do. Yeah. So we now have the LGFA going to present to us. And we have Mark here and Sumitha. So, right. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you. Yeah.
Councillors, apologies, Andrew Mickle, I think in previous years, he's got a really important role this afternoon. He's judging the Sole Government of Waipa Excellence Award to the LGFA sponsors.
Sorry, and Andrew is one of the judges, and I think Waipa District Council's got 3 entries into the awards this year, so we felt it's better for him to be there judging those awards than being up here. So Smitha will go quickly through 5 or 6 slides for you, and then very happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so if I start with the slide 3, LGFA recent developments of 2020 and 21. One of the key things was the New Zealand sovereign had a sovereign rating upgrade back on 22nd of February this year from AA plus to AAA. So on back of that, LGFA had its rating upgraded to AAA on the same day. This upgrade was important from 2 aspects. One was how rating agencies view the importance of LGFA to the local government sector and thereby the closeness to the government. And also, if you look at the highest rated bank is AA minus, and that is 2 rating, not just below LGFA. So both points help LGF to raise debt at a lower cost and pass that benefit to member councils. And also I'd like to, the other thing I would like to draw your attention is to the record amount of lending that we have provided to councils the last 8 months. For the end of February this year, we have lent 1.9 billion, and we are forecasting about 3 billion of lending for the full financial year. So that's again the record amount. In terms of the membership, we have had 6 member councils joining us since January 2020, and now the total membership stands at 72 out of the 78 councils. Another 3 councils are in the process of joining us. So the next new product initiative. So we are about to commence CCO lending, which is means that the LGF can directly lend to a CCO, but this can only be done with the council guarantee of those CCOs. And we are expecting about 3 CCOs to join us at this stage, as it needs a certain scale to benefit from this initiative. Also, the number of councils provided some feedback as to their need for green funding. So we have put together a green, social, and sustainable framework, lending framework, which is also known as a GSS framework, which means the member councils will be able to access this GSS lending in the next financial year. So if you have any projects such as green building, footpaths, or cycle lanes, etc., maybe you may be able to apply for this funding under this category. Another new product initiative was the standby facilities, which already Auckland Council has a couple of standby facilities with LGFA in place, and Christchurch and Greater Wellington Regional Council also are in discussions with us at the moment. We are not proposing that councils give up their banking relationships, but we are offering a competitive product in the marketplace for member councils to sort of compare and look at, and then sort of, yeah. If I go to the next slide, which is the slide 4. LGFA COVID-19 response. One of the key interesting development was the announcement by Reserve Bank New Zealand back in sort of March 2000 last year regarding its large-scale asset purchase program of government's bonds from the secondary market. In April 2020, the Reserve Bank expanded the scale and scope of this LSEP program to include LGFA bonds as well. To date, our Reserve Bank has purchased about 1.75 billion of bonds from the secondary market. LGFA was the only non-government or the corporate to be included in this program. LSEP program helped us to bring down the yields that picked up due to economic uncertainty created by the COVID-19 early April last year. So it's a positive sign for the sector that in a time of crisis, the government was prepared to provide additional support to LGFA to support the local authorities. Another measure was the increase of standby facility provided by Reserve Bank from 1 billion to 1.5 billion, and then roll out that for the further 10 years. LGFA has never used this facility. However, it's so symbolic that it is there, and the government is prepared to step in and assist LGFA to help local government sector to borrow at sort of competitive rates. Another area that we sort of what we made changes was our liquid asset portfolio, also known as LAP. Back in February last year, we had about 550 million of liquid assets in there. By end of February 2021, we have increased that to 1.5 billion. Again, if we get to another crisis, we have a larger pool of liquid assets that can be made available to provide ongoing loans to the councils. Also we increased sort of lending margins to councils from 10 basis points to 20 basis points, and also borrow notes percentage increased from 1.6 to 2.5. So these measures were implemented to sort of help LGFA to boost our capital and then sort of provide some comfort to rating agencies around our viability. And also we started collecting future council borrowing requirements on a rolling 6 months basis so that we could plan ahead and then continue on our strategy of funding. So next slide. So we also made a change to net debt to revenue ratio covenant for rated councils with a minimum external rating of a single A. We increased this ratio from about 250% to 300 for the next 2 financial years, and gradually coming back to 280% by 2026. So this way, the councils will have extra headroom to navigate the next couple of years with unexpected revenue shortfalls due to COVID-19 impact. Draft statement of intent. We got the draft statement of intent out there now. There are no changes to the primary objectives. However, under the secondary objectives, we have added the last bullet point, which is to assist the local government sector with significant matters such as COVID-19 response and the proposed 3 waters reform program. Once we sort of have an idea as to the proposed structure of the water entities, we will work with the government and the shareholder council to facilitate the proposed changes and to help the sector. But at this stage, yeah, we are awaiting some more information on that. Next slide, performance targets. So we, to 6 months, December 2020, we met all the performance measures except a couple of outcomes that's shown in the process on the right side. The first one being achieve 85% market share of council borrowing in New Zealand. The reason behind it is that the Auckland Council has a debt book of about 10 billion, and then when you're running such a large debt book, you have to have a diversified funding mix. So to maintain that funding mix, they issue locally and offshore in their own name, and also they borrow through LGFA. So if you exclude Auckland Council, we have a market share as at 31st December of 94%. The second point was the council visits. We managed to do only about 22 council visits last year due to COVID travel restrictions. However, we are working very hard to visit these councils in the current financial year and meet the sort of measure. Yeah, that's so I'll finish the presentation there and sort of take up any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Bronwyn.
So of the 22 councils, is Waipa one of them, or are you still?
Waipa is a shareholder.
Oh yeah, I know we're a shareholder, but of the 22, in terms of the visits, have you visited our council yet?
This year, I don't think we have, but we will be. Okay. We have we are halfway through the so we have not completed the number of councils.
And can you tell us what sort of type of, I suppose, what are some of the actions, typical actions that might fall out of that review? Would it be some recommendations around the Green Sustainability Fund, or I mean, what would it sort of look like?
Oh, so the council visits we make are more to discuss issues like debt levels, long-term plan projected rate increases. So they're just standard visits. We try to visit every council borrower more from the point of view that you're a guarantor, the council's a guarantor of LGFA. And so, of course, given that we are a large lender to councils, we need to go out there to protect the interests of the guarantors. So the visits will be usually once a year. It's also difficult at this point in time because we wanted to make sure that we came to visit councils during the draft LTP process as well too, to remind them of their responsibilities around meeting the LGFA debt covenants that we impose. So, so hence that's why it's a bit of a late starting. Look, they're usually what we go through. Discussions this year around the proposed impact from water reform, debt levels, rate increases, headroom under our financial covenants, typically the conversation topics.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ken, would you like to say something?
Yeah, so a comment, and then if I may, Chair, just a couple of questions. So so look, in regard to the shareholder visits, I can say that that these guys have, I've been very impressed by the level of engagement over the years from the LGFA. They have very regularly visited. They have visited once a year, and that's been great. That didn't happen in this COVID affected year. However, what you guys did do is you had a shareholder forum in the second half of last calendar year, and that was in Wellington, and I did attend that, and that was a very good day. That was it was very educational. A good insight into what the LGFA were up to. So that was good. Chair, I just wouldn't mind just a couple of questions about the new initiatives that you shared. So the first one's just on the CCO lending, and look, I have no idea. I mean, probably the main one in this locality would be Waikato Regional Airport, who you heard from just before. I guess my concern there is you've indicated that's obviously dependent on a council guarantee. Is that likely to have any impact in your mind in regard to this council's credit rating? Could there be a flow-on impact if we were to guarantee any lending to Waikato Regional Airport? Could that impact Waipa's credit rating in your view?
Yeah, okay, yes, it's a good question. So, so how the CCO lending works is, if it's a CCO, then it has to be guaranteed by the shareholder or shareholders. If it's a CCTO, then there's a minimum requirement of uncalled capital in there to meet the debt obligation. So I'm assuming that the airport will be a CCTO, not a CCO. So you'll have to be required to have a minimum level of uncalled capital in it. The CCO lending, the initiative was established to effectively bring on Dunedin City Council. So Dunedin City Council is unique in New Zealand in that it borrows through its CCTO subsidiary, then it lends the money back up into the council and across the other CCOs. Dunedin City Council is one of the 6 councils who's not a member, and that was one of the reasons for them. The other CCO is also CCHL, so Christchurch City Holdings Limited, which is a diverse holding company, and it's a fairly substantial part of the Christchurch City Council balance sheet. So they're the 2 major CCTOs who are actually going to be using this. The issue with this is that you really do need a minimum amount of borrowing, because there's a fairly large amount of legal documentation to go through with a onboarding of a CCO, CCTO. And it really comes down to the fact that one council is very similar to another council in terms of how it's structured, the political framework, the governance, the legal definitions. CCOs are all different. And so we're sort of sensing that you probably need at least a minimum of around about $50 million of debt to actually justify. What we're seeing is either councils will borrow and then lend down to the CCOs or CCTOs if that's acceptable, or the CCO, CCTOs are actually off borrowing in their own name. We will look at, yes, consolidating debt levels up onto the council balance sheet if a CCO is borrowing a substantial amount, sort of thing. So, for instance, when Dunedin City Council comes on, we'll be looking at them from a group basis as opposed to purely a parent basis, because if we only look at them from a parent, we would not then be looking down to the levels of debt held at the subsidiary level.
Okay. Yep. So just and sorry, just through the chair, one follow-up question. Thank you for your response on that. The other thing that you talked about in terms of a new initiative was the green bonds, and you mentioned their suitability like for cycleway investment. So so Waipa is investing into cycleways, etc. So look, do they? I guess I'm just asking about the benefits of those green bonds. Like, is that a cheaper tranche of borrowing? Or what benefits would we be getting by going down the green bond path, rather than our usual lending mechanism?
Yeah, That's a good question. You're already borrowing very cheaply,
Yes.
but obviously as a finance person, you want to borrow even cheaper, Ken. So for instance, you know, our on-lending margins to councils is 20 basis points, 0.2%. On Norwegian peers, the on-lending margins are around about 0.8% to 1%. So already the margins are very cheap. It's very hard to sharpen the pencil even further from a cost point of view. We are considering whether or not we could actually offer a small discount on that, and that's to compensate you for the fact that if you do put assets into a green, social, sustainable framework, then there's an obligation for you to actually report on an ongoing basis. And so there is some additional paperwork involved. What's important though is that it will showcase some of the projects that you are doing. We will have those projects up on our website in our annual report. So I think that's important. And it's projects such as green buildings, anything to do with carbon reduction, anything to do with water protection, floodbank protection, but also water and wastewater as well too, where there's sustainable outcomes. So, it is important, but less of a financial benefit to you, unfortunately, but that's because the margins are so tight anyway.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I'd like to ask a few questions just on those special bonds. Like you also mentioned, it's available for housing. Have you had any approaches from councils looking at maybe doing special housing packages for themselves, like for their communities, or social housing or something like that? Because I presume that's the intention behind that fund.
Yes, it is. So we'll be a lender. We will not be able to lend directly to those projects. We will have to lend to the council at the parent level. Then you will have to lend to your community housing, social housing providers in your own name. And again, you think about it, LGFA has been set up where they're to protect you as a guarantor. We can only lend secured against your rates income or other councils' rates income. So we can't go off to an entity that can't provide that security. So we will lend to the council here, secured against your rates. You can then go and lend on lend if you want to.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you. And I was going to ask about your response to the Shareholders Council commentary on your SOI. That's all. There were a few things there that they picked up. I guess whether or not you are going to take on board everything that they've raised. There were quite a few things about governance and then ratepayer financing, scheme development and all of those, and treasury policy, that kind of thing. Like, is your intention to really just follow on from the things that they have raised, or do you have a divergence of opinion on it?
No, I haven't got the lead in front of me, but I remember most of them. Yes, we're undertaking a governance review of the board at the moment. There is an AGM in November, and there's likely to be some rotation of directors. So we're currently doing with a outside independent assessor a skill set review. So we're doing that. We're currently doing a review of the treasury policy as well too. So that's important. We're now 10 years in the making at the end of this year, so it's timely to actually do that as well too. The things that we were not going to do, what we're pushing back upon, was one thing was to go embrace further the Reserve Bank and the funding for lending program. So they were saying, oh, can we get cheaper funding through the Reserve Bank? We're not a bank, so that program was established to provide funding for banks to on-lend to consumers and businesses. That's not our game. I think the other major one from your point of view as a shareholder was also whether or not we needed additional capital, or could we provide a mechanism for either new capital for existing shareholders to sell their holdings. We don't need new capital. At this stage, we've got adequate amount of capital. We're AAA rated, the same as New Zealand government, so we don't need that. We increased our borrower notes, which provides our major source of capital last year. We don't consider that it's our role to facilitate amongst shareholders transfers of shares. No shareholder has wanted to sell their shares or transfer their shares over the last 9 years. Your $100,000 investment 9 years ago is now worth $500,000 of value now before any additional sort of goodwill on top. You got to remember your shareholding is here to facilitate the business. You make more money a year out of getting cheaper funding through us as opposed to the return on your shareholding. So our view is that we keep the share capital at the required level to keep the credit rating, but we don't need additional capital. So we'd rather leave the shareholding unchanged.
Okay. And then just one last question about the water reforms that are coming, and we're told that there's a massive investment program needed. I presume that the LGFA looks at being one of the sources of that financing. So is that correct? And would you treat the water entities on an equal footing as councils, or is there a proposal to actually have a different set of rules for them? I don't even know if you've thought about it yet.
Oh, we've very much thought about it. So we had a meeting with the Minister 2 Wednesdays ago. So look, LGFA is the largest lender to the sector. Of the 13 odd billion of loans we've got, we think it's around about $3.5 to $4 billion of loans are against water assets, or have been borrowed from councils against water assets. What's important to us, we're completely agnostic on the water reforms. We are the largest lender to the sector. What we've said to DIA and to the Minister is that we'll work with central government on however the reforms play out. What's important, though, is that we can only lend to councils secured against rates. These water entities on a standalone basis will be much more highly leveraged than a council. They will be around about a BBB credit rating. Their debt levels will be 2 to 3 times higher than a normal council. Currently, as it's proposed, there won't be rate security against them. So effectively, as it stands now, we will not be a lender to these new water entities. However, we'll see how the financial structure goes, how the ownership structure develops. And as I said, we're very willing to work with central government on trying to get an outcome that's actually really good for the sector. We are the cheapest borrower and therefore the cheapest lender after the New Zealand government. They do want a role for us somewhere in there, but we've got to make sure that we're here for our 72 councils first and our 63 guarantors. That's the primary driver for LGFA. If we do lose $4 billion worth of loans in the next 4 to 8 years, based on the council's draft LTPs at the moment, sector debt is going to increase by at least that, if not more, over the next 6 to 8 years. So hence that's why we sort of said we don't mind either way. We're not going to defend our position because we feel that we're going to have sufficient loans in demand from councils going forward.
Okay, thank you. That's really enlightening. Yeah. So no more questions. So I'd just like to thank you both for being here today and your presentation. And look forward to hearing from you in the future. And I have a recommendation now to receive these reports. I don't know what page it is though. I'm just going back there. Page 32. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, it's quite a long, and that's accepting the draft SOIs as well, the letters. So you're happy with all that? Okay, so Roger, you're going to move and Philip's going to second. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. And I think we're having an afternoon tea break now for 15 minutes. Is that all right?
Something else to eat.
Yep. So back at 3:20.
I came rushing in.
come and join me up here, that'd be great. Yeah. Of course. Yeah, power, yeah. No, I'd like, so we're doing the 8th-month report, so we welcome Nada. Yeah, thanks. It's page 157 of our agenda.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We have the results for the 8-month report. And just firstly, I just want to point out that on page 158, that it's there's a note there just saying that these forecast changes haven't been reflected into the 21-31 LTP as yet, and that there will possibly be a significant difference in year 1 for the opening debt. Okay, so getting into page 163, just an overview there, and it's looking compared to annual budget, the forecast at the end of the year, we've got surplus looking at 38.4 million, 10 million higher than the budget, which was 28.4. And the overall expenditure is forecast to be 1.8 million lower than budget. And then the capital expenditure, so if you could see the table there on page 166, and there you can see all those projects that have been deferred to future years, which is the 21-22 year. And a lot of those have to do with the Cambridge Growth Cell projects. And then on page, you can see on page 168, there is a graph there just with the actual capital expenditure compared to forecast and the annual plan. So that's just a comparison. And then we have the external debt. We have some graphs on from page 170, the external debt, and that's just measuring the LTP, and that's the 21-31. So that's the draft LTP, the annual plan there in the green, and the forecast in the red, and the 21-22, which we haven't had an annual plan for that. So that's just measuring against the annual plan and the forecast there. And then there's similar for the capital expenditure, the same sort of graph down on 171, and the rates growth, which is measuring the annual plan and the LTP against the actuals. And the financial risks, so our current borrowing rate is 1.4%, so it's a little bit lower than our assumption at 1.86, and that's just due to the lower interest rates. Development contributions revenue, we had an annual plan, we had 12 million, and that's dropped down to 1.6 just from the changes in the development timing. Growth impact on rates is the same. So we're on track there. The inflation, no change. And the central government subsidy payments, we had 7 million in the annual plan, and that's actually forecasted now at 11.6 million.
Nada, can I just interrupt there? Yep. Just on the growth impact on rates, 2.4% is what we're on track for. But if you go back to the previous page with that has the rates growth graph, I mean, the green column shows that our actuals have been consistently far higher or significantly higher than the forecast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you know what it is currently?
I think Sarah's coming across here.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, sorry. So we have done an update to the growth just to check with the assumptions. So for this, we did an update. Unfortunately, at the time of the update, QV was quite far behind with our valuations. But when I looked at the average rate, we were almost exactly on track to meet the 2.4%. But we will be giving an update at the with the April report, so in a few, well, you know, the next F&C, and that will have all the properties that QB have caught up with. So we should have a really accurate figure for you at the next F&C. But from our calculations for the 8-month report, we looked almost identical to tracking where we should be.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yep.
No, thank you. That's great.
And then actually I was just going to say that I'd just take the rest of it as being read, and if you had any questions.
Okay, so any questions? Yes, Roger.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good result, isn't it? I mean, when you see it, is that giving us a little bit of an indication that there's going to be a reasonable surplus at the end of the year? This year we've been faced with 1 or 2 LTP challenges in trying to sift what's going in and what's going out. Is there going to be any capacity to actually reconsider some of those discussions?
Yeah. So through the chair, we have had a look at the cash surplus, and it does look like we're forecasting a reasonable size cash surplus this year, but that obviously depends on a number of factors. So yeah.
Telling me that there will be. The other question that I asked was, is there an ability for us to reconsider some of those expenditures that we limited within the LTP?
Yes.
Everybody's looking at everybody.
Yeah, no, look, that's fine. Hey, so so look, I can't share too much just now, but we have got some issues that we've just identified in the last few days. Really, not so much in the rating space, the rate funded space, but in the growth / development space. That looks like it's going to put quite a bit of pressure on our debt. So so look, we are looking to actually bring you guys into this is only in the last absolutely in the last 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 business days. We are looking to workshop that with you in the very, very near future, and to formally talk to you about that as you enter the hearings and the deliberation stages. So so look, let's not get too excited. And like I say, this is stuff that's not going to change our rating numbers, or our rating percentages, our average rates increases, but we have got just a bit of a concern on the debt side, the DC funded debt side that we're still working through, but we'll bring to you in very near future just to formulate your thinking before we get into DLIPs. Yeah.
And sorry, and just through the chair, so as you know, with the LTP, we did use all of the cash surplus we had. So any cash surplus this year will be the only surplus that we do have, because we have used all our prior year's surpluses.
Just remember that, Roger. Okay, right, are we waiting on questions, or Nada, do you want to carry on, or what's the story? Any other questions? Okay, so if you'd like to carry on with your presentation then.
So I am Amy Wallace from the Business Improvement Team. So I'm just going to speak to the non-financial performance. So on pages 21 through to 29, we've included an organisational performance overview, which just highlights the organisation achievements over the past 4 months, and also the community engagement strategy. So pages 31 to 33, we have included an overview of how we're tracking against our strategic priorities. And then from pages 34 onwards, we are looking at the performance measures. So how we're tracking against the level of service measure targets which are included in the LTP. So those are broken down into the various groups of activity. Throughout the 8 groups, we have 83% of our performance measures on track, which is a really good result particularly after the year we've had. Are there any questions around the level of service measures?
Yes, Susan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions. I just have an observation to make. On page 23 and 24, you've listed the ginormous amount of work that's been undertaken by the comms team, and I just want to acknowledge the vast amount of work that they've undertaken, and it can be really difficult often in that really public facing role. It'd be really challenging at times. So I just wanted to acknowledge the fantastic work they're doing in that space. And when you see it listed like that, it's pretty daunting. So well done.
Could I ask some questions about the strategic priority indicators? That's on page 32 of the report, or 192 of our agenda, because the delivery of the CAPEX program against growth, no, that's all. I thought that it's unlikely to be reached. So at the moment it's orange, but it's unlikely to be reached. Is that correct? I'm just wondering how serious that is.
Area around the managing risk is the strategic priority, and that's around the annual plan budget.
I'm only asking about the CAPEX and the growth and the renewals, because they both look like unlikely to reach their targets.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, it compares to annual plan budget, and as you've seen in this 8-month report, we have significantly pushed out quite a lot of that capital expenditure, so it is unlikely to be met for reasons that if you look at the forecast, it's actually even if we reach the forecast, we're unlikely to meet it. So it is because a significant amount has been pushed out, and the timing of the capital projects has changed, so that's the main reason. Yep.
And the targets are fixed to the long-term plan numbers rather than any adjusted one.
Yeah, it's fixed to the annual plan. That's correct, not the adjusted forecast. So if we are looking at adjusted forecast, I'd hope at this stage, when we've just reforecast, that we would be saying that it's likely to be met. But yeah, because we are at annual plan numbers.
Cool, thank you. Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Mine's, well, I guess it could be a question, but it's more, yeah, it is a question. I'll direct it maybe at Ken. It's around that community engagement strategy. And look, I know councils are really busy places, but it just, I guess at different times, there's different lots of engagement, and some are less contentious than others. And I've just highlighted a few of the ones here that, just having read things, feedback from community, and just you hear things, the communications for the Memorial Park, I think over this side that's pretty contentious, and we've had people in here. The Cambridge Pool, I mean, that's probably settling down, but I know there's been a lot of feedback on that. The Streets for People engagement, there's definitely been a lot of feedback on that, and the consultation around the Hamilton Road cycleway, for instance. So there's just 4 things I've just pulled out. Now, I'm sure there's a bunch of others, but I guess my question is, just as a leader of people as well, is what are we doing to protect our staff against what I can see as effectively harassment or bullying? It's not harassment, but it's bloody bullying. So what is this organisation doing to protect our staff?
Yeah, look, that's a tough question, and and I know that the staff do cop a lot of flack. That's well known within the executive team. So actually, it looks like Charlotte's keen to answer that. So yeah, I guess it is a known issue. Yeah.
That is a very great question. It's called thick skin most of the time. And unfortunately, I think coming into this environment, that's something that we expect will happen. It happens, we do get disgruntled people over the phone, over frontline, and via social media. So I think most of the time people do disconnect from the fact that they're talking to human beings and think of council as a thing. And for me personally, that's quite a challenge to try and understand. But the main thing that we try and talk through as a team is that, most of the time when people are upset, it's not a personal attack. They're upset with the situation and just to take a step back and support each other through it. But I would be lying if I said to you that it wasn't hard sometimes. And yeah, like it's something that the team deal with, and sometimes in a good way, sometimes not in such a good way. But I think like over the weekend, yeah, we are having a lot of interest in our projects, and the best thing that you can do sometimes is just to step in there and clarify the situation. Yeah, like just by way of example with Streets of People, I think, yeah, people get really frustrated, I think, with some of those changes, and say, you know, the team are going to be down in front of BNZ today, we're going to unleash on them. It's like, well, actually, like there must be a more constructive way of talking through the situation. So, you know, like in those sort of situations, like I do jump in there and as myself, not as council, and politely sort of point them in the right direction. But I mean, the reality is that you would deal with it too. Like it's pretty tough sometimes. And yeah, like that does impact your well-being. So it's people sometimes are not very nice, but I think that they just, yeah, frustrated with the situation, and yeah, that's probably what I have to say about that.
Hey, just on the, I just, you know, I hope we're not taking the attitude that the customer's always right, you know, which is maybe something that gets handed to us on courses, because the customer's not always right, and the customer sometimes doesn't deserve the respect that the next customer does. So, you know, I hope you guys are able to switch off and sort of, you know, just give some people no airtime at all, you know, just delete sort of thing, because otherwise, just with all this happening, you know, I think it's just a little period in time. I mean, I haven't seen this little period in time being in this council or on the fringes of it for the last 10 years or so, where quite a few contentious projects, I don't know, all of a sudden just seem to have hit all at once. And the thing is, they're actually not big projects. They're not like tens of millions of dollar projects. Some of them are quite small, but obviously create some passion.
Yes, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think also with the Streets of People and the Hamilton Road project, the population's got pretty confused between the 2 or 3 different projects that have been going on as well.
Oh, okay.
And that message may not have got out well enough too. So yeah, there's been a lot of confusion about the 2 projects. So yeah, that's the feedback I've been getting.
Yeah, I can respond to that. I think we do need to appreciate that, you know, we have a fast changing environment that we're working in at the moment, and we never shy away from the fact that we say, you know, council is complex. There's a lot going on, and so we can definitely take that feedback on board. I think within the in the grand scheme of things, we've done pretty well to keep our community updated through multiple channels around what's happening with our different projects. And there will always be someone who said, you didn't receive that, or you didn't send that to me in the right way. But, you know, we'll take that feedback on board. I think that we do need to give the team credit, though, that they're doing the best that they can and trying to reach people, you know, directly and through those other different channels. And we can see that in the results. Like we measure everything that we do. So yeah.
Yes, Liz.
Yeah, look, I was just going to say that as community leaders, we have a part to play in this as well. You know, we all have Facebook pages. We simply need to support the staff. You know, they're going out and fronting a lot of this LTP stuff. We need to be there as well and make sure that we are in attendance. This is our ability. This is our turn to connect with our community. And yeah, I think, you know, by and large, there's a elected councillor presence at most things, but not all at the moment. So we need to do our bit in supporting the staff as well.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Liz. Actually, Charlotte, I was just wondering whether a strategy that could involve the elected members too when we're at these events is that, you know, it's a group approach. So if someone is seen to be taking a bit of a hit with a member of the public, that it is okay for one of us to come in, and as you said, you know, there's a more constructive way to approach this or something, and just diffuse the situation a little bit or something. Yeah, I'm sure you're all capable of something like that, but not just let that one person just take it all or something. Okay, all right, so we've sort of got a bit off track with the report. So I'm not sure whether or not Amy's finished, or are there any other questions? I did have one question in the finance section about the Pirongia forestry, which Ken might, I don't know if it's Ken, but it looks like there isn't going to be the return that was thought. I mean, the idea was to get those trees harvested to benefit this financial year. So it has the forecast changed, and it might be questionable whether it's worthwhile doing it at all.
Yeah, so through the chair, just in response there, yes, absolutely, it is still worth doing that. John, please correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm concerned, this is only a timing issue. So our return is as good as, in fact, could possibly be better than it was before. But it's just, it needs to be the other side of this winter rather than the current side of this winter, as we had hoped. Yeah, there was actually there was a little bit of a failure on the part of our outside supplier in terms of the timing here. But my understanding is it's actually worked in our favour. Yeah, John, you might be able to clarify.
So at the moment we're dealing with PF Holson's to lock in log prices are good at the moment. So there's a Chinese buyer that we're trying to sign up, which will guarantee that log price, and the actual revenue from that stream will increase 70 or 80,000, I think, with the delay.
Yeah, thanks, because the delay hasn't been popular with locals, I can tell you, but it's good to know that it is also going to be happening, and it is, yeah, a worthwhile proposition. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, in watching the media over the past few days, we thought about selling directly to Bunnings and Mitre 10, but I'm not sure that's actually a possibility.
Okay, so no more questions. So thank you for your report, and I'm just moving back to the resolutions page. And it's really just to receive the report and approve those budget changes. Thank you, Lou, and a seconder. Thank you, Mike. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we have Hamilton. Oh, yes.
Where it has a decrease in revenue for the forest of 736,000 due to lower forecasted contract price. Is that not correct?
Yeah, well, that's the reason for my question, but I didn't actually have it in front of me.
Yeah. Look, that is not correct. So essentially, the decrease in revenue and the decrease in expenditure as well is basically taking it out of the current financial year and putting it into the LTP. Okay. So look, unless I'm mistaken, Sarah, that's I don't think that's a great explanation. In fact, that's an incorrect explanation, I believe.
The reason is, I mean, because I'm familiar with the very, very strong log price at the moment. I was very surprised to see that, so I was glad we'd pick that up. But I think
coming back to what Ken said, by the time we'd done the 8-month report and the forecasting, I think it was a week later that we realised that it wasn't going to happen in this year. So I think that's going to be moved out probably this month into next year.
Yes.
So could we had an addendum that said move out from the current year?
Yeah,
that looks like it's a total loss from revenue.
Yes. No. Look, really well raised. That report went through a few sets of eyes, but clearly that comment was missed. That is not a that's not an appropriate comment. So apologies on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. And now we're on page 214 of the agenda, Hamilton and Waikato Tourism 6-month report, and we have Jason Dawson here, so welcome, Jason. With a supporter. I haven't met her before. All right.
I'd also like to introduce our chair, Annabelle Cotton, who's joining me here today. So thank you. Thanks for your flexibility, everyone, for allowing us to present at the end of your day. We've got our industry conference on today out at St John Rowland Centre. So That's why I'm dressed like I'm wearing t-shirts and looking a bit relaxed. So I've just jumped from here to there. So thank you all for allowing us to present at the end of your meeting. As always, I will take our 6 monthly report as read. That was from July last year through to December. As always, I have a presentation that I'll just quickly go through with you, just pulling out some of the key summary highlights for us.
In addition to chairing Waikato Tourism, I also chair the Audit and Risk Committee at the airport. I understand you've had Mark, our Chief Executive, presenting to you today and telling you about the interesting ride that we had last year. So, I think we're lucky that both tourism and the airport are in a really good position.
Absolutely. Good.
Behind you.
Yeah, it's behind me. It's just not share screen. It's all good. Look at what. It's good.
I think we do have I think we've got a presentation in our workshop material actually.
So look, what I'll do is I'll until we get over the technical glitches, I'll just talk through some of the key highlights anyway, particularly for the region and also for Waipa. So all I can say is, look, as a region, we are obviously impacted by COVID, but I would probably say we are rebounding a lot quicker than other parts of New Zealand right now. In the report, I do refer, obviously I'll talk about Waipa soon, but as a region, we're only down 7%. And within that region, we've got places like Hamilton that are only down 4%, but Waitomo is down like 40%, Matamata Piako district with Hobbiton is down another 50%. So again, we do have different pockets of our region that are suffering quite significantly, but overall as a region we are doing okay. Again, 2.65 million people live within a 3-hour drive radius of the Waikato, so we're a significant drive market we can turn on and off post the lockdowns, which has been happening in Auckland as well. We have 7 key performance metrics that we have with you as an organisation. Again, the visitor nights have managed to remain steady. So even though we have had 4 months of physical lockdown as a region, we managed to jump back up with regards to commercial accommodation across the region. Some of that we do also report on do not include the 3 managed isolation facilities, such as Jet Park Hotel. So these are robust figures that don't include that or the social housing we currently have in the motels across the region. So we are still doing very well as a region as well. Industry investment, we have a reduction in industry investment this year given COVID. So again, we have a $100,000 target that we must meet this financial year. As of end of December, we achieved 75,000, and as of today, we're tracking around 95,000. So we're on target to meet that. Conventions and business events have bounced back for us as a region. We've now jumped to 3rd largest region for business events again. A lot of that's been due to Auckland's 4 lockdowns that they have had, where we've had conferences and meetings pushed out of the region in Auckland and coming into the Waikato. So we have used that, unfortunately, as a bit of an opportunity for us to try and rebuild the business market here in the region as well. Too scared to touch. No, it's all good. We'll just carry on. So look, let's talk about Waipa. So look, Waipa's visitor expenditure is now tracking at 94 million. You are down 9%, but again, when you look at the single-digit decrease compared to other parts of the country even, Auckland up the road is down 40%. We're doing really well. So look, well done Waipa. Events have always been a key driver for the district, as you know, to try and bring back activity. So look, Māori Cup last week, Waka Ama, dragon boating, and we've got canoeing coming up. Significant draw cards of visitor stay and play throughout that time. So you've definitely got people competing, but obviously something like Māori Cup is multi-day. So really good economic injection into the district during what we call autumn period for us. You've got field days returning, which we've been working with the National Field Day Society on. quite proactively. So we've got 350 camper vans set up in Claudelands Arena. We're outside to host all the exhibitors. So sales for that have gone really well. We're currently tracking at 75% sales for exhibitors to be staying in the camper vans, which then frees up our commercial and non-commercial accommodation for field day visitors. So we're hoping that as we didn't have field days last year, this year will be a significant opportunity to, again, big economic injection into the community and into the district during the middle of winter. So looking forward to seeing more events return to the district. Yes, absolutely, Hazel. The National Horse Trials, just in case. It is this weekend. You've actually got back-to-back events. So very busy, absolutely. Like we've mentioned before, your commercial accommodation is tracking well. So as of July and December, you had around 86,000 guest nights. That's in motels and hotels. And obviously, your occupancy rate's been tracking between 50 to 55. So again, good results in a return on investment for accommodation providers in the district. And also Airbnb, look, you have lost obviously some Airbnb listings due to COVID. You are down 134 listings, but you're tracking at around 318 providers as of end of the year, which is good, 50% occupancy rate for those. And again, we see peaks and troughs for Waipa. So on during Māori Cup, Waka Ama, and then also field days, we see a spike in additional listings. These are people obviously renting out their farm cottages or their spare rooms during key events for the district, which also help retain those visitors in your district. Look, we've done a lot of marketing this year, as every other region has done. So again, it's been a pretty much an always-on activity for us. Normally we would switch off our summer marketing because it's normally our peak time. This year, we've just kept marketing going throughout the entire summer period. During summer this year, we targeted locals a lot to get out there and explore your own backyard with our It's Only Magic campaign. Again, 35% of visitors within the region actually visit other tourism attractions or attend events from within our own region. So we have a big population within Waikato, so it's really important we also activate them as well. National marketing campaigns, I was going to show you a few examples of some of the campaign work we've done with Tourism New Zealand, particularly showcasing Waipa. We've managed to get a lot of TV commercial coverage with Tourism New Zealand for that, including some of the activities on Lake Karapiro, right through to the Avanti Drome and also cycling on Te Awa River Ride. Sanctuary Mountain Mangatotiri has been a big focus for us with regards to wellness and connecting with nature. So it's been a big visit. We've had a big boost, and actually they'll talk soon around their visitor numbers. Everything seems to be up right now with regards to people coming back into the region and exploring places they've never normally gone to. So Sanctuary Mountain, as we know, is one of our assets, but for many others it's still a hidden gem. So again, it's great to see visitor numbers climb for Sanctuary Mountain as well. We've also been working with our neighbours, Rotorua, Taupō, Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty around promoting short drive itineraries in the Central North Island. That's been going really well for us as well. And as of last Monday, we've launched our first ever joint marketing campaign with Auckland Unlimited, where they are marketing to us to say, come over the Bombays and actually experience Auckland City, whereas we're also targeting right now Aucklanders. If you like this in Auckland, you'll love that in the Waikato. So again, we're getting some great traction with that campaign, and soon we'll be using media personalities and profiling to get more visitors into the region. And then lastly, look, just some media and PR activity that we've been working on. So many of you would have seen the Cuisine magazine feature. So for the first time ever, we managed to get Kelly Brett, the editor, down here. She stayed in the region for 5 days. Of course, she fell in love with Cambridge, but also Te Awamutu and Pirongia. She wrote a fantastic feature on all the food producers here in the Waikato. And also we managed to get a number of Waipa products like Belfield butter into Martin Bosley's cooking repertoire. And then he added that to the top 100 products you need to buy for this season. So I caught up with the Belfield butter guys last night. Look, that alone has now generated significant revenue for them, and they're looking to now finally expand their business. They've moved to Woodbox out at Mystery Creek, and they will be moving into hopefully offering some consumer events plus taking on staff. So we know the power of the food tourist for New Zealand. We've never really showcased that as a region. So again, it's really important we continue to leverage that. We've got Kelly Brett actually back in the region this week doing some other work for us. House and Garden has been a new partnership for us. It's a new demographic, 55 plus. They normally are what we call sinks or dinks, single income, no kids, or double income, no kids. They're not their propensity to travel is higher than those who go during school holidays. They want to travel midweek, which is good for us. So again, that travel feature has been really positive, and we've got some great conversion rates for visitors outside of school holidays. And then again, telling the food story for Waipa. I've talked about cuisine. We've also done a New Zealand Herald and Stuff travel partnership. I think you might see an example there from the Herald around Cambridge, the Foodies Guide. Again, we also launched last night our Waikato Food Tourism Plan, action plan to the food industry, to talk about how we're going to use what we call gastro-tourism to try and drive as another hook to get visitors here into the Waikato. Yeah, no, it's still not working. That's all good. Regional Events Fund. Look, lastly, the Regional Events Fund is now underway. So it's a 3.75 million events fund between us, Rotorua, Ruapehu and Taupua. 82 events did apply across the 4 regions, and we've shortlisted to 24 who now go through to the next stage of assessment. 50% of those events that applied are new events for the region, for Waikato, and 50% are existing events that actually want to add an extra or new event to enhance that event itself. So the core purpose of the National Regional Events Fund is actually around driving domestic visitors where international visitors would normally come to. So we're excited about some of these cool new events that potentially might happen for Waikato, and this is a new fund that literally we would not been able to have deliver without government support. And then lastly, touching on government support, we did attract 700,000 of STAP funding from the government for this financial year, and that's based on keeping our existing local government funding intact. So great to get that funding support from this council and the rest of our councils. Food tourism, obviously, we've launched the action plan we'll be discussing soon. We've started the exploratory work for a Waipa ambassador program. So we've had our first initial workshop, and we'll be doing a lot more workshops with that. We're working with the museum staff at Te Awamutu in Cambridge, and also be doing some work around Parongia as well. You've got Te Arawai, which we know is a great resource. We're going to weave that into the ambassador program. So it's a 3-hour workshop that will be at low cost to get anyone in Waipa to come along to learn about their history, their place, and then about the future of Waipa, and then eventually around how we host visitors here in the Waipa district. So a very exciting program. We've got some good engagement with the community on this program, so we'll be launching that shortly. Touring routes, we're looking at the Thermal Explorer Highway. You know, it passes right through the heart of Cambridge. We're looking also at developing other drive itineraries between Te Awamutu, Cambridge, Hamilton, and also down to Waitomo. And we're looking at a West Coast journey from Port Waikato all the way down into Taranaki. So that's a joint project with Venture Taranaki. We're also working with Ruapehu on a new branded highway between us, obviously, and them going down through Taumaranui on State Highway 4. And then lastly, a regenerative tourism program. So we have around 30 operators within our region who have joined the regenerative tourism program. It's more around taking sustainability to the next level. What types of activities will you create and leave for communities? What's the legacy benefit you will create based on your tourism operations? So again, 30 operators have joined that program along with 6 other regions, and we'll be bringing everyone together at the end of the year. And then we hope to make these businesses pretty much 100% regenerative for the future. So this is going to be the new way that tourism will be delivered here in Waikato. It's something we had begun pre-COVID anyway, but it's been great, unfortunately, because of COVID to kind of reset that and reshape the industry for the future. I'll probably just leave it at that for now, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, Roger.
Thank you, Jason. No need to convince me about what you're doing. Absolutely tremendous. But looking at the possibility of a vaccination passport being issued, you know, further downstream, say a number of years, what I'm a little bit concerned about is what the current situation is going to do to the longer term prospect of our accommodation infrastructure. You know, we already see that a lot of our tourism rooms are actually allocated into the social housing in one of our main access cities, which is obviously going to impact a lot on that flow. What's your view on that? What is the prognosis going to be quite negative?
No, hopefully not. So look, if the Trans-Tasman bubble opens, don't hold me to any dates, 30 to 40% of MIQs currently are by returning New Zealanders coming from Australia or Australians coming to reunite with New Zealand families. So our hope is with the Trans-Tasman bubble coming in that actually there would be a reduction in managed isolation facilities. But again, it will be phased. So I know for our facilities, and all of them, we're being looked to be extended until April next year. But the idea is that some of them will actually transition out potentially by September, October, some in December, and then eventually the remaining ones in April. So the idea is, with quarantine-free travel in Australia, it is a true test about the need for managed isolation facilities long term, as long as we can also have 100% proof around vaccination. And also there is pre and post-departure testing that obviously some airlines are already demanding. Emirates obviously already have that in place, and they will continue that post our international borders reopening. Air New Zealand are looking at a new app which would actually completely integrate with your passport currently, but also with a digital passport. We're calling it around health.
It was the motel sector I was most referring to.
Yeah, motel sector, sorry, I can't give you a great answer on that one. I do meet regularly with MSD. There are 1,200 Waikato residents currently in emergency housing, which is motels mainly in Hamilton and our other towns. And really it's just the speed of whether how quickly Kind Order can build social housing, we can transition those families out of our motel sector. So the long-term goal is obviously to bring our motels back into the free market. But as you know, that's probably going to take, it's a long tail, unfortunately, that one, compared to getting our hotels back, which is what desperately needed. However, look, we do have new investments. So look, developers are looking actively right now because we have rebounded quicker. So we do hope that in the future we would get a couple of new hotels in the region, and particularly one in the district as well, which would be great.
Thank you. Liz. Yeah, thank you both for coming in today. Yeah, great report. So look, I guess I'm looking at the Regional Events Fund, and of course, what I see is a massive opportunity here for the Waikato and obviously the other regions as well. So what I see here in the events space in particular, and for our other tourism providers, is that we've been in this kind of hoping like heck that things are going to get better, that things are going to return to normal. But the reality is life isn't going to be, the norm is not there anymore. So the introduction of this fund, and I'm just greatly appreciative of it actually, because while there hasn't been a sense of confidence, all of a sudden there is. Event venues now have the opportunity, and event hosts, and you know, I've got 2 operators that are looking to bring 2 new events to Karapiro Domain. That confidence would not be there if this fund wasn't made available, and if the support, you know, that you've been able to put behind it, and managing and administering the fund as well. So really appreciate the effort, and I know it is above and beyond what you normally do. So really appreciate the efforts there. Also, the North Island Regional Passenger Rail Service. So this is I know mayors are getting together now between Wellington and Hamilton, really Wellington to Auckland, to look at something new. And I just was interested in your thoughts around what that might mean for international tourism when it returns. Is it something that you've been after for a long time? Is, you know, overseas models, overseas, you know, destinations always have a great passenger service. You get from A to B very simply. Is that something you see that international visitors have been looking for, or do they prefer New Zealand to have more, you know, hire a car and hire a motorhome? I'm just really interested in your thoughts, because this came up in conversation with mayors, and I guess we were lacking some advice at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So look, we were definitely part of what we call the lobbying for the return of Northern Explorer, which is the Auckland to Wellington train as it exists. As you know, it only operates 3 to 4 times a week. Our ultimate goal from a tourism perspective is to have Northern Explorer operating 7 days a week, like all the other great scenic railroads. And that eventually there would also be some different options to stop, because if we were offering a daily service on the Northern Explorer, you could stop in our towns, stay the night, and then board the next day. Currently, you have to get off the train, and then you might, and as you know, the train doesn't stop at all our stops on the North Island main trunk line. So look, our ultimate goal is we would love to see it go 7 days a week from a tourism perspective, both ways, and then also have more stations that it would stop at as well. To enact or really create what we call a stay and play model for visitors off the Northern Explorer, we would also need to have transport operators that actually connect with those railway stations. So I hark back to where we were decades ago with Waitomo. People would get off the train at Otorohanga or Te Kuiti and be bused to Waitomo Caves, and then actually jump back on board later in the day. So it's a bit like building a cycleway. We can build the infrastructure, but we also need kind of the flesh on the bones, which is all the additional activities and transport operators that we would need to have along the North Island main trunk line. So, but I think for Waikato, there's definitely huge potential. We did work with Te Huia, so the Regional Council and Kiwi Rail around developing a charter service. So before Te Huia launches next week, we're meant to have 2 charter services going from Auckland to Hamilton and Hamilton to Auckland on the weekend, and having stay and play packages for 2 weekends. But unfortunately, the week before we were due to launch it in January, Kiwi Rail announced track maintenance, which would have added another 60 minutes to the journey, and a bus transfer from Otahuhu, which again does not add to a great customer experience. So we are kind of attacking it from both ends. We're working with the government around trying to get Te Huia to have more regular services, off-peak services particularly. It's a commuter rail service, but we know that leisure will drive the future of rail for this country as much as it has for the airport. Hamilton Airport, for example, used to be traditionally a business airport. As of the last 3 to 4 years, it is now 50% leisure travel, mainly off-peak. So we still have commuters or business people travelling in the morning or on the night flights, but during the middle of the day, those 6 to 7 flights to Wellington and Christchurch are actually full with leisure travel. So again, we see leisure as being a huge opportunity in travel for New Zealanders and for international visitors. And it also contributes to our hopefully becoming a carbon neutral, carbon positive destination for the long term, because you're right, at this stage you have to drive in our country to actually explore it.
Just been announced that the Te Huia service won't go on Sundays for 3 years up to Auckland.
Correct.
Yeah. And I would have thought that weekend would have been one of the biggest patronage days.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a real disappointment.
It is the Saturday service, if you have seen the schedule, is only obviously up in the mid-morning on Saturday and back in the afternoon. Well, you literally only have, I think, 2 to 3 hours in Auckland. That does not work for the leisure market. Our goal is obviously not for the weekend excursions on both ends, where Aucklanders can come to Waipa for the weekend and we can go north. And again, Te Huia has the opportunity for us, as we all know, to extend into Waipa. The ultimate goal is not only will we do off-peak into Hamilton, we'll bring it to other parts of the region, but particularly Waipa district.
Okay, thank you. So no other questions? Oh, Bronwyn, yes.
O tēnei te mihi ki a koe, Jason. I just wanted to ask a question around the STAPP projects. I see you've got 27 programs of work on. Could you give us an idea of the length of period of time of those programs? So are they a 1 year, a 2 year, 3 year? And just in terms of the 700,000, is there any capability in there to, I suppose, have you got enough money to do all those programs? And have you got some capability restrictions within your own teams?
So as part of that government funding, the government did allow us all, every region got some type of funding from government to activate this. It allowed for a 12-month project coordinator. So we have got someone actually helping us coordinate 27 projects. Most of them, each one of them has been divided up amongst the team. So I'm leading 3 of the projects myself. With the time frame, it's 12 months. So we received the funding at the end of December. Last year, we need to deliver all the projects by December this year, and we are on track. So food tourism pretty much has been launched. That project is done. Regenerative tourism is underway. Ambassador programs are underway, and then all the other 20 projects as well. So far we are on track to deliver that. But we are working with government for the long-term goal that maybe they would look at doing another year of government funding. I think the industry will take a lot longer to recover.
Kia ora.
Can I just add to that? Jason probably won't mention, I suspect, because he's very modest. But what I understand from about the application that went in for the STAP money was not only was the Hamilton Waikato Tourism the first of the applications to go in from around the regions, but it was seen as probably the best and most well thought out and well structured application. So the Hamilton Waikato Tourism Board gave Jason and his team, congratulations for the work that they did there. My understanding is with what's the other one? The Regional Events Fund. Similarly, it was I think the first application that went in. And were the other applications asked to kind of rework theirs?
Correct, to follow the structure.
Follow the structure that the Hamilton Waikato and on behalf. Well, we are providing the secretariat for the 4 regions that are involved. Tourism is running the secretariat for that on behalf. And there's been all sorts. We've had Scott from the airport asking really, really smart questions about the finances and, you know, what are the tax implications? Where does GST sit? All sorts of things that the ministry hadn't thought about. Yeah, so I can give you assurance that you're in very good hands with Jason as the chief executive. He really, yeah, he's doing incredible things with the not particularly large amount of funding that we have to deliver services across the region. Yeah, I've chaired Hamilton Waikato Tourism for I think 4 years now, and I will be rotating off at the end of this year when I come off the airport board. And I'm really comfortable about where tourism is, Hamilton Waikato Tourism is sitting at the moment, how it's responding to the opportunities that there are from being in the Golden Triangle. And we've been through some pretty interesting financial modelling scenarios about, you know, not knowing how the funding was going to go in terms of the operator contributions. What if the economy did go completely pear-shaped, which it doesn't seem to have done. But Jason is doing a really effective job with the amount of funding that he has. And I'm very comfortable with the work that he's doing as chief executive. So I'd just like to pass that on to you as very interested stakeholders in Hamilton Waikato Tourism.
Thank you very much, Annabelle, for that sort of extra detail, which Jason hadn't somehow managed to convey. And I just want to say we really appreciate the leadership, Jason, that you're showing in the sector and the superb job you're doing, and obviously able to secure that additional funding from central government and keep up the good work. No, thank you very much. I think we've covered all of the questions in that. So I've got a recommendation there to accept receive the report. Oh, thank you, Philip and Liz. Seconding, all in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so our next item on the agenda is customer service opening hours. Charlotte. Charlotte. Hopefully, there's always the hope, isn't there?
How much?
Yeah. We had a bad start.
Yes. So where is she at home?
Oh, jeez. Welcome, Charlotte.
100 in Cambridge. So no wonder.
Okay, thank you. So now we've got the customer opening hours. Okay, let's focus on this and yeah, give Charlotte our attention. Thanks, Charlotte.
Kia ora tātou. And yeah, hopefully you're still awake after a long day. Now this one's pretty straightforward. We've got a proposal here to make some slight tweaks to our opening hours. Basically what we're not doing here is dropping our level of service. We are merely changing things around because our customers have never had more options of reaching us. So by changing our opening hours on our front line from 9 till 5, that basically enables our team to catch up on those like emails and phone calls and other things that have come through overnight that usually require a bit more investigation. So we've provided you with some pretty good analysis, some data that shows how customer behaviours are changing and how they're engaging with us. And really what we're seeking today is your endorsement to make this slight tweak so that we can yeah, have a little bit more capacity in the morning to catch up with that other work. So
okay,
let's leave it open for questions.
Thank you, Charlotte. Liz.
I don't have a question. I'm just happy to move the recommendation.
Lou, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charlotte. I think this is a great idea because you've got time to get onto your emails and do all your bits and pieces and work. And I know this actually operating on a front desk back in my days when I worked. The first hour, you actually sat there and often got 1 or 2 customers, but you're out way off the screen. But if you can answer all those emails and get all that out, great. I think it's a good idea. It also allows you to rotate your staff, wouldn't it? Yeah.
So are you seconding the recommend?
Include answering the telephone? No, the telephone calls that come in?
No, so our phone service will remain unchanged. So at the moment it's manned, well, it's not manned, manned, staff is 24/7. So Hamilton City Council, I know, Hamilton City Council run our after-hours service for us. Phone service will remain unchanged. So it's just the opening of our office doors in Cambridge and Te Awamutu that we're talking about.
So you haven't over-organised too much, because it is taking rather a long time to get a telephone call through, isn't it? I'm guessing that maybe it's easier for people to say, oh, damn it, I'm going in instead. I haven't got time to mess around waiting for this phone call to get through. I'll go there instead.
Well, that's quite possible, because in the mornings we do have a queue of people who love to call us between 8 and 9 o'clock. But if they do wish to come in, actually sometimes it's a little bit easier for our frontline team to also investigate an issue or query. So, yeah.
Okay. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I've just got one question really. It's just I'd like to really see a review process in place here. Or is this to come back in maybe a year's time or start of next year or something? Just feedback from the community as how it's gone. I support it, but I think we think it's a minor change, but for the community, it's 4 hours out. The other options, of course, is you open up on a Saturday morning, or you do one late night, or I'm not suggesting that, but there are other options that people, would think about. So I just think maybe just come back to us with some feedback and start next year sometime of how you think it's gone.
How does that sound? Yeah.
Yes, definitely ready to do that. And I think the other thing we should mention is we're about to embark on a customer service experience strategy. So we are going to be doing some canvassing with customers directly on the service that they're currently receiving. So any feedback out of that affects hours, service levels, operations, we'll take on board and listen to that as well to help enhance what we're doing.
Will that be done before this change takes place?
We're about to start the canvassing of our customers next month during April, but it won't be complete by the time this takes place. So.
And one other thing, we still do our quarterly perception survey with our customers, so any feedback would be captured in that process as well.
Okay, so good discussion there, and the review is on the plan, so that's great. So I've got a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. So I'll put it all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. And now we have a resolution to exclude the public. Liz and Graham, thank you. All in favour, please say aye.